Hello guys. Welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see what if Ash merged with a Lucario and became the ultimate Aura Guardian. If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The unveiling. The world did not scream, it tore. At the apex of Mount Coronet, where the veil between dimensions had always been thin, reality had been ripped open like canvas. The sky was no longer a familiar blue but a chaotic, swirling vortex of impossible colors and shrieking energy. Spear Pillar, the ancient stage for gods, was now a shattered wreck. Broken columns, etched with runes that had once hummed with power, lay strewn like discarded bones. At the center of it all was the wound, a jagged, vertical tear in the fabric of space-time, bleeding raw, untamed energy that warped the very air around it. Gravity flickered. Rocks floated, hesitated, and then slammed back to the ground. The wind howled, not with the chill of the mountain peak, but with the voices of things that should not be. At the epicenter of this cosmic wound stood Ash Ketchum and his Lucario. They were back to back, a tiny island in a sea of pandemonium. Pikachu was a frantic ball of yellow lightning at their feet, his cheeks sparking uncontrollably as he tried to fend off tendrils of ethereal energy that lashed out from the rift. "It's not closing," Ash yelled, his voice torn away by the gale. He gritted his teeth, one hand outstretched as he projected a shield of blue aura, a flickering dome that sizzled and buckled against the onslaught. "It's getting bigger." Lucario didn't need to speak. Their minds were already linked, a bond forged through years of battle and friendship, now strained to its breaking point. He could feel Ash's desperation, his fear, and his unwavering resolve. Through that same bond, Ash felt Lucario's own aura, a deep well of power, being drained at an alarming rate. His partner was pouring everything he had into reinforcing their shared shield. "The distortion is consuming everything," Lucario's voice echoed in Ash's mind, not as words, but as pure intent, a wave of cold certainty. "The world's life force, it's being siphoned." Ash could feel it too. A profound sickness in the air, a draining cold that had nothing to do with the altitude. The very essence of the mountain, the life within the rock and ice, was being pulled into the maw of the rift. He pushed more of his own aura, a rare and potent human energy he had only just begun to understand, into the shield. It groaned, momentarily stabilizing. It wasn't enough. They both knew it. This wasn't a battle they could win with a thunderbolt or an aura sphere. This was a war against physics itself, and they were losing. A memory, sharp and sudden, surfaced in their shared consciousness. It was an image from an ancient text they had seen in a dusty library in Celestic Town, a passage about the earliest Aura Guardians. It spoke of a forbidden technique, a last resort for a crisis that threatened the world's very existence, the Aura Fusion. A merging of the spirit and life force of a human and a Pokémon bound by the deepest possible connection. The text had called it a sacrament, a sacrifice, and a perversion all at once. It warned that the process was irreversible and the outcome, unpredictable. A new being, neither human nor Pokémon, would be born. Or both souls would be extinguished, their light snuffed out by the sheer force of the union. "There is no other way," Lucario projected, his thought a blade of cold, hard steel. His resolve cut through Ash's fear. There was no hesitation in him. Ash looked at his partner, not with his eyes, but through their bond. He saw the unwavering loyalty, the absolute trust. Lucario was willing to cease to exist for a chance to save the world, for a chance to save him. And in that instant, Ash knew he was willing to do the same. The fear vanished, replaced by a quiet, profound certainty that mirrored Lucario's own. "Okay," Ash breathed, the word a vow, together. He turned, and Lucario turned with him. They faced each other, their small sanctuary against the storm shrinking with every second. Pikachu, sensing the shift, let out a desperate cry, a questioning, fearful sound. "Pikapi, it's all right, buddy," Ash said, his voice strangely calm. "Get clear, now." He didn't wait for a response. He and Lucario brought their palms together. The moment their aura-wreathed hands touched, the world dissolved. There was no light, no sound, there was only sensation. Ash's consciousness, his memories, his very sense of self, shattered into a million pieces. He was the scared kid from Pallet Town, the champion of Alola, the friend, the trainer. He felt Lucario's essence, a fierce and loyal spirit, a proud warrior's code, the memory of Riolu's first steps, the taste of Apophon, the thrill of a perfectly executed attack. Their lives, their souls, became a torrent, a swirling river of experiences and emotions, crashing into each other. For a terrifying moment, there was only chaos. Oblivion beckoned, a peaceful, empty silence promising an end to the overwhelming torrent. It would be so easy to let go, to dissolve into nothing. But then, a single point of light ignited in the void. A shared memory. The moment they first met, a tiny Riolu hatching from an egg, looking up at a young boy's face. A shared feeling. Unconditional trust. That single point of connection became an anchor. The shattered pieces of their two souls began to coalesce around it, not rebuilding what was, but forging something entirely new. Ash's strategic, outside-the-box thinking fused with Lucario's combat instincts. Ash's boundless empathy merged with Lucario's ability to sense the emotional truth of others. Human resolve and Pokémon spirit. They did not become one mind with two voices. They became one consciousness. The process took an eternity and an instant. Back on the ruined peak of Mount Coronet, the flimsy aura shield vanished. The energy of the rift surged forward, ready to consume the two figures at its heart. But before it could touch them, an explosion of power erupted outwards, a wave of pure, crimson aura so potent that it dwarfed the chaos of the rift itself. The light was blinding, a new sun dawning on the mountaintop. It slammed into the vortex, and for the first time, the tear in reality recoiled. The shrieking of the void was drowned out by a single, resonant hum, a chord of immense, controlled power. When the light subsided, two beings no longer stood there was only one. It was taller than Ash, sleeker and more powerful than Lucario. The body was a seamless blend of both forms, humanoid but with the digitigrade legs and powerful physique of a Lucario. The fur was a deeper shade of blue, almost black in places, with a chest of pale, cream-colored fur. The familiar black mask-like markings of a Lucario framed a face that was strikingly human in its structure, yet undeniably alien. The crimson eyes held a depth of wisdom and power that belonged to neither Ash nor Lucario, but to the new soul they had created. The appendages on the back of its head were longer, more like a mane of thick dreadlocks that pulsed with a soft, inner light. On the back of each hand was a single, bone-white spike, a physical manifestation of the aura it now commanded. This new being, this Ash Lucar, opened its eyes. It did not see a chaotic rift. It saw the threads of reality, frayed and torn. It felt the life force of the world bleeding away. And it knew, with a clarity that was absolute, what it had to do. It raised a hand, not in defense, but in command. "Be still," it said. The voice was a baritone harmony, Ash's tone layered with the deeper resonance of Lucario's spirit. The words were not a plea, but an order directed at reality itself. It took a step forward, into the storm. The untamed energy of the rift lashed at it, but it did not flinch. It walked with a purpose that was terrifying to behold. It reached out, its fingers brushing against the edge of the tear. Instead of being annihilated, the chaotic energy seemed to calm at its touch, the violent shrieking softening to a low hum. Ash Lucar plunged its hands into the rift. The pain was unimaginable, a billion screaming needles in its soul, but it was distant. The merged consciousness processed it, filed it away as data, and focused on the task. It grabbed the frayed edges of the two separate realities. It felt like trying to stitch together lightning with water. But it had the tools. Its aura, no longer just a shield or a weapon, was now a force of creation. The crimson energy poured from its body, not as a blast, but as millions of delicate threads. They flowed into the tear, weaving, knitting, and binding the wound in space-time. The impossible colors of the vortex began to recede, replaced by the steady, calming crimson light. The ground stopped shaking. The howling wind died down, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the crackle of cosmic energy being tamed. It was a battle of will, fought on a plane beyond physical comprehension. The being in the rift pushed back, a vast, empty consciousness that desired only to consume. Ash Lucar pushed harder, its resolve a burning star against the empty cold. It drew upon the life force of the planet, not siphoning it, but borrowing it, acting as a conduit for the world's own desire to heal. It felt the strength of the ancient mountain, the pulse of the rivers deep below, the quiet life of the Pokémon hiding in the caves. All of it flowed through it, fueling its effort. From the sky, a new sound emerged, growing steadily louder. It was a rhythmic, powerful roar that cut through the unnatural silence. A massive shape descended from the clouds, landing with a ground-shaking thud a safe distance from the cosmic battle. It was a Garchomp, its powerful form radiating an aura of contained strength. On its back, dismounting with a grace that defied the treacherous terrain, was a tall woman in a long black coat, her blonde hair so long it almost touched the ground. Cynthia, the champion of the Sinnoh region, had arrived. Her gray eyes, usually calm and analytical, were wide with disbelief. She had felt the catastrophic energy spike from her villa in Undella town and had come immediately. She had expected to find Dialga and Palkia locked in a world-ending struggle. She had prepared herself for a battle against a god. She had not prepared for this. She saw the rift, a sight that her scholarly mind knew should be impossible. And she saw the being at its center, a creature of myth and legend that did not exist in any book she had ever read. It was bathed in a light that felt both sacred and terrifyingly powerful. Her Garchomp growled, a low, guttural sound of uncertainty, its senses overwhelmed by the sheer concentration of aura. "Easy, Garchomp," Cynthia murmured, her hand resting on her partner's flank. She didn't take her eyes off the scene. She was not afraid. She was fascinated. This was a power that dwarfed her own, a power on the level of the legends she had spent her life studying. But it wasn't chaotic. It was focused, controlled, and purposeful. It was fighting to save them. She watched as Lucario gave a final, mighty pull. The two edges of the rift groaned, metal screaming against metal on a cosmic scale. The crimson threads of aura flared, and with a deafening implosion of sound and light, the tear in reality snapped shut. Where the vortex had been, there was now only a faint, shimmering scar in the air, already fading. The impossible colors were gone. The sky above Mount Coronet was a clear, crisp, evening blue. The stolen silence was replaced by the natural whisper of the wind. The crimson light radiating from Lucario faded, its body slumping with exhaustion. It staggered, one knee dropping to the ground. The physical, mental, and spiritual toll of mending the universe had been immense. For a moment, its form flickered, the outlines of a boy and a Pokémon visible like ghosts within its frame, before stabilizing. It took a deep, shuddering breath, the first breath of its new life in a world it had just saved. Pikachu, who had been hiding behind a shattered pillar, rushed forward, his small body trembling. "Pika Pie." Lucario looked down, its crimson eyes softening. It reached out a hand, and Pikachu, after a moment's hesitation, nuzzled against its fingers. The connection was still there, familiar and comforting. "It's okay," the merged voice said, softer now, tired but steady. "It's over." That was when it sensed the other presence. Its head snapped up, eyes locking with Cynthia's across the ruined landscape. Its posture immediately shifted from weary savior to wary guardian. It rose to its full height, placing itself between the newcomer and Pikachu. The exhaustion was still there, but it was masked by a formidable, commanding presence. Cynthia did not make any aggressive moves. She simply stood her ground, her expression one of careful neutrality. "I am Cynthia," she said, her voice clear and carrying easily in the thin air. "Champion of the Sinnoh League. I came to investigate the energy disturbance." Lucario said nothing. It watched her, its senses analyzing her on a level she couldn't possibly comprehend. It felt the powerful, calm aura of a master trainer, the deep bond with her Garchomp, the sharp, inquisitive intellect. It sensed no immediate hostility. But it sensed caution and a deep, unnerving curiosity. "What are you?" she asked, the question direct, yet not accusatory. The being hesitated. What was it? It was Ash. It was Lucario. It was both and neither. The name came to its mind, unbidden, a simple, factual descriptor of its new reality. "We are Lucario." Before Cynthia could respond, a device on her belt beeped. She glanced down, her eyes scanning a message on a small screen. Her brow furrowed. Simultaneously, Lucario's head tilted, as if listening to a distant sound no one else could hear. Its new senses were far more acute than sound or sight. It could feel the subtle shifts in the world's aura, the communications of those who knew how to use it. Miles away, in a hidden sanctuary carved into the rock of a remote mountain range, an old man named Kale knelt on a meditation mat. The room was Spartan, lit by the soft glow of a large, blue crystal. He was the acting head of the Aura Guardians, a sect so secretive that most of the world believed them to be a myth. His face was a mask of grim disapproval. The aural shockwave from Spear Pillar had rocked their sanctuary to its foundations. It was a power he hadn't felt in a millennium. It was wild, immense, and to his traditionalist senses, a violation. An unsanctioned fusion, he muttered, his voice raspy with age and disbelief. An abomination. They have broken the most sacred laws. An acolyte, a young woman with a disciplined posture, stood waiting by the door. Master Kale, she said, her voice respectful. Your orders? The balance has been shattered, Kale said, rising to his feet. His movements were slow but deliberate. This being, whatever it is, cannot be allowed to act unchecked. Its very existence is a threat. Send a team. Kanto, Hoenn, and Sinnoh outposts. The best we have. Their orders are to assess the entity. Determine its stability, its intent, and its level of control. Use necessary force to ensure compliance. The acolyte bowed. And if it resists? Kale's eyes narrowed. Then we will know it is a monster, and we will put it down. Back on Mount Coronet, Ash Lucar felt the ripples of that command spread through the global network of Aura. It felt multiple signatures, all powerful, all disciplined, shifting their focus towards its location. They were coming. You need to leave, Ash Lucar said to Cynthia, its tone urgent, shifting from wary to commanding. This place is about to become a battlefield. Cynthia raised an eyebrow, her gaze flickering from Ash Lucar to the horizon. She hadn't seen anything, but she had learned to trust the instincts of powerful beings. A battlefield? Who is coming? My own kind, the merged voice said, a note of bitterness creeping in. The ones who believe order is more important than survival. As if on cue, the air shimmered. 3 figures appeared in a flash of blue light, teleporting to the peak with practiced ease. They wore the traditional garb of the Aura Guardians, deep blue robes, fingerless gloves, and simple, functional masks that covered the upper half of their faces. 2 more figures dropped silently from the sky, landing without a sound, their descent cushioned by aura. 5 in total. Each one radiated a calm, disciplined power that was worlds apart from the raw, untamed energy the rift had possessed. The lead guardian, a tall man with a powerful build, stepped forward. He held a staff made of polished hickory, tipped with a crystal that pulsed in time with his heartbeat. He completely ignored Cynthia, his focus entirely on Ash Lucar. By the authority of the Elder Council of the Aura Guardians, the man announced, his voice devoid of emotion. We are here to assess you, entity. You will power down your aura and submit to an examination. Ash Lucar stood its ground. Pikachu bristled, leaping onto its shoulder, cheeks sparking defiantly. Pikachu. I will not, Ash Lucar stated calmly. I have just saved this world. I will not be treated like a science experiment. The lead guardian's grip tightened on his staff. Your existence is a violation of ancient law. Your power is unstable. You are a threat to the very balance we are sworn to protect. Our orders are to ensure your compliance. Do not force us to take drastic measures. Cynthia finally stepped forward, placing herself partially between the 2 groups. Her Garchomp moved with her, a silent, deadly shadow. I am the champion of this region. And you are not sanctioned by the Pokémon League. By my authority, I order you to stand down. The Guardian didn't even look at her. This is not a league matter, champion. This is a matter of global security. This being's aura output is greater than that of any legendary Pokémon we have ever recorded. It is a walking catastrophe. Stay out of this. His condescension was a mistake. Cynthia's eyes narrowed. Garchomp, she said, her voice dangerously quiet. Dragon Rush. But before the land shark could move, Ash Lucar held up a hand. No, this is my fight. It looked at the 5 guardians, its crimson eyes seeing more than just their bodies. It saw their aura, the rigid lines of their discipline, the unwavering certainty of their dogma. They were not evil. They were misguided. They were afraid. You want to assess my control? Ash Lucar asked, its voice taking on a resonant power that made the air vibrate. Very well. Let the assessment begin. The 5 guardians moved at once. They were a perfectly coordinated unit. 2 rushed forward, their hands glowing as they prepared to fire focused blasts of aura. 2 others fanned out, creating a pincer, their movements fluid and silent. The leader remained in the center, his staff glowing as he began to trace a complex rune in the air, a binding spell. It was a flawless tactical assault. Against any other opponent, it would have been overwhelming. Against Ash Lucar, it was painfully slow. To the merged being's enhanced senses, the world moved like it was underwater. It could see the trajectory of the aura blasts before they were even fired. It could feel the intent of the flanking guardians, their footsteps like drumbeats in the earth. It could see the intricate lines of the binding spell taking shape in the air, a beautiful but fragile cage of light. It didn't dodge, it simply wasn't there. With a movement so fast it seemed more like teleportation, it stepped to the side of the two aura blasts, letting them sail harmlessly past and explode against a distant rock face. In the same fluid motion, it swept a leg out, not with physical force, but with a wave of pure aura. The ground beneath the two flanking guardians turned to quicksand for a split second, their perfectly balanced charge ruined as they stumbled. It then appeared directly in front of the leader. The guardian's eyes widened behind his mask in shock. His binding spell was only half formed. He had no time to react. Ash Lucar simply placed 2 fingers on the crystal of his staff. A pulse of calm, crimson energy flowed from its fingertips into the crystal. The bright blue glow of the guardian's aura was snuffed out, neutralized instantly. The half-formed spell dissolved into nothing. The entire exchange had taken less than 2 seconds. The other 4 guardians recovered quickly, surrounding it. They didn't fire blasts this time. They formed aura constructs, gleaming blue swords, shields, and spears. They attacked again, a whirlwind of deadly energy. Ash Lucar did not create a weapon of its own. It simply moved. It was a dance. It weaved between the sword strikes, its body flowing like water. It used the backs of its hands to parry, the bone spikes deflecting the energy blades with a sharp clang. It wasn't blocking. It was redirecting. A spear thrust aimed at its chest was guided harmlessly into the shield of another guardian. A sword slash was turned back on its wielder, forcing them to leap away. It was demonstrating absolute control. It was fighting 5 elite aura users without throwing a single punch, without firing a single blast. It was using their own energy, their own momentum, against them. It was a lesson, not a fight. Cynthia watched, utterly captivated. This was not the raw, overwhelming power that had sealed the rift. This was precision. Finesse. It was the difference between a tidal wave and a surgeon's scalpel. This being was not an unstable monster. It was a master. The leader of the Guardians, having regained his composure, roared and charged forward, his staff now crackling with raw, unshaped aura. He swung it in a wide, powerful arc. This time, Ash Lucar caught the staff in one hand. The explosive energy crackled around its palm, but it did not flinch. With its other hand, it reached out and gently touched the center of the Guardian's chest. "Enough," it said, its voice resonating not in the man's ears, but directly in his soul. A wave of pure, calming energy flowed into him. It wasn't an attack. It was understanding. In that single moment, the Guardian felt a flicker of what Ash Lucar felt. The lingering pain of the rift, the exhaustion of the fusion, the deep, unwavering desire to protect, and the profound sadness of being met with hostility by his own kind. The Guardian's attack faltered. His staff fell from his nerveless fingers. He staggered back, staring at Ash Lucar not with aggression, but with a dawning, horrified awe. The other 4 Guardians froze, their aura weapons dissipating as they sensed the sudden change in their leader. The fight was over. Ash Lucar stood tall, its breathing even, its crimson eyes filled not with triumph, but with a weary sorrow. It had proven its point. Cynthia chose that moment to step forward, her presence reasserting itself. She addressed the lead Guardian, her voice cold as the mountain ice. "Your assessment is complete. Report back to your council that you found not a monster, but the reason you are all still alive." The lead Guardian could only nod, his pride shattered, his certainty broken. He looked at his hands, then back at the being before him. He and his team gathered their leader and, with a final, conflicted look at Ash Lucar, vanished in another flash of blue light. The peak was silent again, the only sounds the wind and Pikachu's soft cooing. Ash Lucar finally allowed the exhaustion to show, its shoulders slumping slightly. It had won, but it had been a hollow victory. "They will be back," it said, its gaze distant, "with more than 5 next time." "They will," Cynthia agreed, walking closer. She stopped a few feet away, her Garchomp at her side. Her expression was no longer just curious. It held a deep, profound respect. You cannot face them, and whatever caused that rift, alone. You need allies. You need somewhere to go where they can't reach you easily. Ash Lucar looked at her, then at the vast, sprawling landscape of Sinnoh below them. The world it knew was gone. The life it had lived was over. It was something new, something powerful, and something very, very alone. Cynthia extended a hand, an open, honest gesture. Come with me. I have resources. I have knowledge. What just happened here has changed the world, and I intend to be on the right side of that change. Let me help you. For a long moment, the merged being was silent. The twin souls within it weighed the offer. Ash's trusting nature warred with Lucario's cautious instincts. But they both arrived at the same conclusion. Cynthia was not offering pity. She was offering a partnership. An alliance of equals. In this strange new existence, that was more valuable than anything. Ash Lucar looked at her outstretched hand, and then met her gaze. It gave a slight, decisive nod. All right, champion. We accept. Chapter 1 end. Chapter 2. Whispers in the Shadows. The air in the Celestic Town Historical Research Center was thick with the smell of old paper and dust, a scent of ages that clung to the towering wooden shelves. It was a stark contrast to the biting, ozone-laced air of Mount Coronet's Peak. Here, the world was quiet, contained. For Cynthia, it was a familiar comfort, a sanctuary of knowledge. For Ash Lucar, it was a cage of whispers. The lingering psychic impressions of 1,000 scholars, the faint oral echoes of the ancient artifacts housed here. It was a constant, low-level hum in its heightened senses. It had learned to filter it, to push it to the background, but the noise was always there. 2 days had passed since the sundering of Spear Pillar. 2 days of an uneasy peace. Cynthia had used her authority as champion to secure them sanctuary in Celestic Town's most secure building, classifying the events on the mountain as a geological anomaly caused by a magnetic storm. It was a flimsy excuse, one that wouldn't hold up to serious scrutiny, but it bought them time. They sat opposite each other at a large oak table, a pool of warm lamplight illuminating the delicate, brittle scrolls spread between them. Cynthia, with the focused intensity of a scholar in her element, was cross-referencing a modern text with a faded, hand-painted map of ancient Sinnoh. Ash Lucar was not reading in the traditional sense. Its hand hovered inches above a scroll written in a long-dead dialect of pictograms. It wasn't deciphering the symbols, it was feeling them, sensing the intent and the oral signature of the long-vanished scribe who had inked them. There's nothing, Cynthia murmured, frustration lacing her tone. She pushed a strand of blonde hair from her face. Every legend, every text about Spear Pillar, refers to the creation myth. Dialga, Palkia, Giratina. The red chain. There's no mention of a tear in reality itself. Nothing about a consuming void. Because it was not a natural event, Ash Lucar's voice resonated, not aloud, but as a direct thought projected into Cynthia's mind. It had discovered that this was more efficient, more private. Speaking aloud felt clumsy, the merged vocal cords still an unfamiliar instrument. And it was not the work of the dragons of time and space. This was something else. Something hungry. It tapped a clawed finger on the scroll it was sensing. The pictograms depicted a great battle. Stylized figures of humans and Pokémon, their forms glowing with what was clearly meant to be aura, were fighting back waves of shadow like tendrils emanating from a central, chaotic mass. The ancient guardians faced this before. This scroll speaks of the Great Devourer, a shadow that fed on the life of the world. They didn't defeat it. The text is clear on that. They only sealed it. Cynthia leaned forward, her gray eyes sharp with focus. Sealed it? Where? How? The details are missing. The end of the scroll is damaged. Corroded. Ash Lucar paused, retracting its hand. Not by time. The corrosion is deliberate. It feels tainted. Like the energy from the rift. The implication hung heavy in the air between them. Someone, long ago, had not wanted this information to be found. As Cynthia processed this, the door to the research center creaked open. An elderly woman, the town elder and caretaker of the center, entered carrying a tray with 2 steaming mugs of tea and a plate of rice cakes. She smiled warmly, her face a roadmap of wrinkles. I thought you two might need a break, she said, her voice a gentle, reedy sound. You've been at this since sunrise. Cynthia offered a grateful smile. Thank you, Carolina. Ash Lucar simply inclined its head in a gesture of acknowledgement. Its interactions with normal humans were awkward. It could feel the mixture of awe, fear, and confusion radiating from the old woman, no matter how kind her smile was. It was a constant reminder of what it now was. A creature that did not fit in the world it had saved. It picked up a mug, the ceramic warm against its three-fingered hand. The scent of the herbal tea was grounding, a purely physical sensation that helped quiet the sensory noise. It was a fragment of Ash's old life, a simple pleasure it was relieved to find it could still appreciate. Carolina's gaze lingered on Ash Lucar for a moment longer than was comfortable. It is a remarkable thing, she said softly, her eyes holding no fear, only a deep, historical reverence. Our town's oldest legends speak of the bond between humans and Pokémon, of a time when the two were so close they were considered one and the same. To see it made real, she shook her head, her smile turning wistful. The world has forgotten its own history. She bowed slightly to both of them and shuffled out, leaving them alone once more. Cynthia took a slow sip of her tea, her gaze thoughtful. She's not afraid of you. She is old, Ash Lucar projected. Her aura is calm. It has settled, like dust. She has seen too much of life to be startled by a new shape. Others are not so composed. It could feel the town outside the insulated walls of the center. The whispers. The furtive glances. The fear. It was a low, constant pressure against its mind. Before Cynthia could respond, a sharp, piercing alarm echoed through its skull. It wasn't a sound. It was a psychic distress signal, an oral scream of pain and desecration. It shot to its feet, the heavy oak chair scraping loudly against the floor. The tea mug in its hand shattered, the hot liquid and ceramic shards falling unheeded. What is it? Cynthia asked, alarmed by the sudden, violent reaction. A shrine. An aura shrine, north of here, near the coast. Ash Lucar's thought was sharp, pained. It's being defiled. Its energy is being twisted, corrupted. It could feel it as clearly as if it were happening in the same room. A sacred space being violated, its pure, tranquil energy being warped into something ugly and malevolent. It was like listening to a beautiful song being rewritten into a discordant shriek. Cynthia was already on her feet, her scholarly demeanor replaced in an instant by the decisive command of a champion. Where, exactly? Ash Lucar closed its eyes, focusing on the psychic signal. A map of Sinnoh appeared in its mind's eye, a living map made of the planet's own life force. It saw the rivers, the mountains, the towns, and the faint lines of energy that connected the ancient places of power. One of those lines, a bright blue thread, was now flickering, turning a sickly, gangrenous purple. Route 224. There's a ruin at the end of a long sea cave. An altar to the guardian of the sea. The sea break path, Cynthia said, her mind already working through the logistics. It's isolated. No trainers should be there this time of day. She pulled 2 Pokeballs from her belt. We can be there in minutes. Garchomp can fly, but we'll need another for you. Ash Lucar shook its head. No, flying is too slow, too conspicuous. It walked to the center of the room, its movements fluid and urgent. Give me your hand. Cynthia hesitated for only a second before stepping forward and placing her hand in its. Its grip was firm, the skin feeling more like supple leather than fur. What are you? She didn't get to finish the question. The world dissolved into a dizzying, nauseating blur of blue and crimson. It wasn't the violent teleportation of a Pokémon move. It was smoother, more disorienting. She felt as though she were being pulled through a needle's eye. The smell of old books was replaced by the sharp, salty tang of the sea, and the oppressive silence of the library was shattered by the roar of crashing waves. The entire journey took less than 5 seconds. They materialized at the mouth of a dark cave, the evening sky above them painted in hues of orange and violet. Cynthia stumbled, her head spinning, and leaned against the cold, damp rock of the cave wall to steady herself. Garchomp had been released from its ball mid-transit and stood beside her, shaking its head as if to clear water from its ears, looking just as disoriented. What was that? Cynthia breathed, her heart hammering against her ribs. Oral translocation, Ash Lucar explained, seemingly unaffected by the journey. It was already staring into the darkness of the cave. Manipulating the spatial coordinates between 2 points through a conduit of aura. It is draining. Even as it said it, Cynthia could see the faint tremor in its hands, the slight dimming of the light in its crimson eyes. Mending reality, fighting 5 elite guardians, and now this. It was pushing itself to its absolute limit. The scream from the shrine intensified, a silent shriek that made Lucario flinch. They're still here, and they're not alone. It didn't wait for her. It moved into the cave, its powerful form melting into the shadows. Cynthia exchanged a look with Garchomp, her own resolve hardening. She drew another Pokeball. Melodic, let's go. The elegant sea serpent materialized in a flash of light, its beautiful form a stark contrast to the grim darkness of the cave. With her 2 most powerful partners at her side, Cynthia followed Lucario into the depths. The seabreak path was a long, natural tunnel carved by the sea, the sound of waves echoing off the wet stone. Up ahead, a sickly purple light pulsed, casting distorted, dancing shadows on the walls. The very air felt wrong, charged with a negative energy that made the hairs on Cynthia's arms stand on end. Melodic hissed, its beautiful scales rippling with discomfort. Garchomp let out a low, predatory growl. They emerged into a large, circular cavern. In the center stood the ruins of a once beautiful altar, a simple, elegant stone plinth dedicated to Lugia. But it was no longer beautiful. It was desecrated. Vile, pulsating runes, glowing with that same purple light, had been carved over the ancient carvings. At the base of the altar, a man in a stylish, dark gray suit stood with his back to them, one hand resting on the stone as if admiring his work. He was tall and slender, with slicked back silver hair that seemed to catch the corrupted light. He wasn't alone. Surrounding the altar were a half-dozen figures in dark robes, their faces hidden by deep hoods. But more unsettling were the Pokémon. A Zoroark, its fur matted and its illusions flickering like a broken screen, revealing glimpses of the snarling, maddened creature beneath. A Chandelure, its flames burning not yellow or purple, but a black, light-devouring violet. They were corrupted, their natural energy twisted into something malevolent. The man in the suit chuckled, a low, melodious sound that was utterly at odds with the scene of desecration. "I was wondering when the world's new watchdog would arrive," he said, turning around slowly. His face was handsome, almost aristocratic, with sharp cheekbones and eyes that glittered with a cold, amused intelligence. He looked them over, his gaze lingering on Lucario with genuine curiosity before settling on Cynthia. "Ah, and the champion herself. An unexpected bonus. I am flattered." "Who are you?" Cynthia demanded, her voice ringing with authority. Melodic and Garchomp moved into battle stances on either side of her. "A name is such a small thing, don't you think? A label for a temporary collection of atoms," the man said with a theatrical shrug. "But if you must have one, you may call me Nile." He gestured to the corrupted altar. "And this is merely a reconsecration. Dedicating these forgotten places of power to a far more deserving master." Lucario took a step forward, its crimson eyes burning with a cold fury. The sight of the defiled shrine, the twisted Pokémon, was a physical affront to its senses. "You are poisoning this place. You are poisoning them." Nile's smile widened. "Poison? No, this is a gift. I have liberated them. Your aura, your life force, it's a cage. It binds you to silly concepts like hope, love, and morality. My master offers freedom from that. The freedom of purpose. The clarity of despair." He snapped his fingers. "Show them." The robed figures and corrupted Pokémon attacked. It was a coordinated, brutal assault. The Zoroark lunged, not with a physical attack, but with a wave of psychic energy, a mind-bending illusion of their greatest fears. The Chandelure unleashed a torrent of its soul-sucking black fire. The robed figures moved with unnatural speed, their hands glowing with the same sickly purple aura as they fired jagged bolts of energy. Cynthia was already reacting. Garchomp, Stone Edge, Melodic, Hydro Pump. A wall of sharpened rocks erupted from the ground, intercepting the black flames. A massive, high-pressure jet of water slammed into the charging Zoroark, breaking its illusion and sending it flying. But the aura bolts were different. They twisted in midair, dodging the rocks and homing in on their targets. Lucario moved. It didn't erect a shield, it met the attack head-on. It became a blur of motion, a whirlwind of blue and black. It didn't block the corrupted bolts. It caught them. Its hands moved with impossible speed, snatching the bolts of jagged energy out of the air. The purple aura sizzled against its palms, trying to corrupt it, but its own crimson energy was like a purifying fire, neutralizing the poison on contact. In a single, fluid motion, it crushed the bolts in its fists and lunged forward. It moved through the robed figures like a phantom. It didn't strike to kill, but to disable. A precise chop to the neck of one, a sweeping leg trip to another, a focused pulse of aura to a third that made him drop, unconscious. They were skilled, but they were amateurs compared to the guardians it had faced. They were dispatched in seconds. Niall watched, his amusement never leaving his face. He even clapped slowly. Magnificent. Truly. The raw power of a Pokémon, guided by the mind of a human. You are the culmination of a broken dream. He snapped his fingers again. His own Pokémon, a crocodile, emerged from the shadows. But it was wrong. Its scales were a dull, sickly gray, and its eyes glowed with the same purple malevolence. Veins of dark energy pulsed visibly beneath its hide. But you are still bound by sentiment. You hold back. You refuse to kill. A fatal flaw. The corrupted crocodile roared, a sound filled with pain and rage, and charged, its jaws opened wide for a crunch attack. But Ash Lucario wasn't its target. It was charging at Cynthia. It was a classic misdirection. While the new, powerful being was occupied, eliminate the known threat. Garchomp moved to intercept, but the corrupted Zoroark, having recovered, ensnared it in another illusion. Melodic was busy fending off the Chandelure. Cynthia was exposed. She didn't panic. She stood her ground, her mind racing, preparing to recall one of her Pokémon and send out another. But she knew she wouldn't be fast enough. She didn't need to be. Ash Lucario was suddenly there, appearing between her and the charging crocodile in a flicker of movement. It didn't block the attack. It met it. It thrust its hand forward, not into the crocodile's mouth, but against its chest. The moment it made contact, it unleashed a controlled, powerful wave of purifying aura. The crocodile's charge halted as if it had hit a solid wall. The purple light in its eyes flickered violently. It shuddered, a low whine of pain and confusion escaping its throat. The dark energy veins receded from its skin. For a fleeting second, the normal, healthy color of its scales returned. The corruption was being burned away. Niall's smile finally faltered. He clicked his tongue in annoyance. Ah, a purifier. How quaint. You're trying to save it. He raised a hand. No damaged goods must be discarded. A shard of pure, black energy, no bigger than a dagger, materialized in his hand. He threw it with blinding speed. It wasn't aimed at Ash Lucario or Cynthia. It was aimed at the crocodile. Ash Lucario sensed the killing intent. It had a choice: continue cleansing the crocodile and let the dagger strike, or protect itself and abandon the Pokémon. It was a cruel, impossible dilemma designed to exploit its morality. It did neither. In a move of pure, instinctual genius, it grabbed the crocodile, spun its massive body around to use as a shield against the dagger, and simultaneously shoved both Cynthia and itself backward, out of the immediate blast radius. The dark energy dagger struck the crocodile in the flank. It didn't explode. It imploded, collapsing in on itself and taking the Pokémon with it. The crocodile dissolved into shrieking, purple motes of light, its life force utterly extinguished. The cavern fell silent. The remaining corrupted Pokémon, their master's concentration broken, faltered. Cynthia's Garchomp shattered its illusion with a furious roar. Ash Lucario stood over the spot where the crocodile had vanished, its form trembling slightly with rage. It had failed. It had been unable to save the corrupted Pokémon. You monster, it projected, its thought a blade of ice. Niall merely shrugged, examining his fingernails. It was a tool. It broke. I discarded it. The master is providing me with far more interesting toys, anyway. His eyes flickered toward the entrance of the cave. And my work here is done. The shrine is broadcasting a new message. One of despair, not hope. A beacon for those who are lost. My master will be pleased. He tapped his foot, and the ground beneath him dissolved into a swirling pool of shadow. Don't let him escape, Cynthia commanded. Garchomp, Draco Meteor. Garchomp unleashed a colossal sphere of orange energy into the air. It exploded in the cavern's ceiling, raining down smaller, brilliant meteors on the spot where Niall stood. But it was too late. He had already sunk into the shadow, and the attack struck only empty stone, shaking the entire cavern and causing rocks to fall from the ceiling. When the dust settled, he was gone. The remaining robed figures and corrupted Pokémon had vanished with him. All that was left was the desecrated altar, pulsing with a weak, sickly light in the center of the ruined cavern. The battle was over, but it felt like a profound loss. They had not only failed to stop him, but he had forced Ash Lucario into a situation where a Pokémon had died as a direct result of its choices. It was a strategic, emotional, and ideological defeat. As Cynthia recalled her tired Pokémon, her mind replayed Niall's words. A beacon for those who are lost. My master. This wasn't a random act of vandalism. It was a calculated move in a much larger game. They were recruiting. While she pondered the strategic implications, a different scene was playing out hundreds of miles away. In the hidden Aura Guardian sanctuary, Kale stood before a council of 5 elders, the most powerful and traditional guardians left in the world. The room was circular, austere, and the only light came from the glowing aura crystals embedded in the walls. The report from the team he had sent to Mount Coronet had been delivered. It displayed a level of control that Sergeant Brolin described as absolute. One of the elders, a woman with a calm, analytical demeanor, was saying. It disabled 5 of our best operatives without causing a single lasting injury. That does not sound like an unstable, chaotic beast. It sounds like a threat of unprecedented magnitude, Kale countered, his voice ringing with passion. He stood in the center of the circle, his fists clenched. Control does not equal benevolence. A precise weapon is far more dangerous than a wild one. This thing broke our most sacred law. It is an abomination, a fusion of 2 souls that was never meant to be. Its very existence is a mockery of the natural order. The world was on the brink of destruction, the elder argued patiently. Perhaps the old laws do not account for such a crisis. And now, Kale pressed on, his voice rising, we are receiving reports from our sensors. Aura shrines across Sinnoh, places of peace and power, are being desecrated. Their energy signature is being twisted into something foul. This began after the entity appeared. It is a harbinger of chaos. Its unnatural aura is poisoning the world, and this is the result. He was twisting the facts to fit his narrative, his fear and dogma blinding him to the more logical conclusion that the entity had appeared in response to the threat, not as its cause. But his conviction was powerful. Another elder, a stern-faced man with a long white beard, nodded slowly. The timing is troubling, he admitted. Kale's point has merit. We cannot allow such a powerful, unknown variable to roam free while our holy sites are under attack. Kale saw his opening and seized it. We must bring it in. We must study it, understand it. And if it cannot be separated, if the 2 souls cannot be restored, then we must contain it. Permanently. For the good of the world. He looked around at the faces of the elders, his gaze intense. I formally request a trial. Summon the entity to this sanctuary. Let it answer for what it has done. Let it prove that it is not the monster I fear it to be. There was a long silence as the elders considered his request. The first elder who had defended Ash Lucario looked troubled, but she was outnumbered. The fear Kale had stoked was palpable. Finally, the stern-faced elder nodded. The request is granted, he declared, his voice echoing in the chamber. Prepare the summons. The entity known as Ash Lucario will be brought before this council to be judged. Back in the damp, desecrated sea cave, Ash Lucario stood before the corrupted altar. It placed its hands on the cold stone, wincing as the vile energy tried to invade its senses. It closed its eyes and focused. Slowly, a warm, crimson light began to emanate from its palms. It wasn't a violent, overwhelming flood of power like it had used to cleanse the crocodile. This was gentler, more persuasive. It was a quiet, insistent hum that resonated with the stone, reminding it of its original purpose. The sickly purple glow of the carved runes flickered. The malevolent energy fought back, but it was a dying thing, cut off from its source. The pure, healing aura of Ash Lucario was a steady tide, slowly washing away the filth. It was a slow, exhausting process. Cynthia watched, standing guard at the entrance, her respect for the being growing with every passing moment. It had fought a battle, experienced a devastating psychological blow, and now, without a moment's rest, it was trying to heal the damage. It wasn't just a warrior. It was a protector. A guardian in the truest sense of the word. After what felt like an hour, the last of the purple light sputtered and died. The altar was clean again, the vile runes now just inert, ugly scratches in the stone. The air in the cavern felt lighter, cleaner. The oppressive, negative atmosphere was gone. Ash Lucar slumped against the altar, the light in its eyes dim with exhaustion. It had poured a tremendous amount of its energy into the cleansing. It's done, it projected, its thought weak. The poison is gone. As the words entered Cynthia's mind, they were immediately followed by another, foreign presence. It was a cold, formal, and immensely powerful oral signal, broadcast across the entire planet. It was not a message of words, but of pure intent. A summons. A command. An image was imprinted directly into Ash Lucar's consciousness. A hidden mountain sanctuary, a circular chamber, and the faces of 5 stern elders. It was Kale's summons for the trial. Ash Lucar straightened up, its exhaustion momentarily forgotten, replaced by a grim, steely resolve. Cynthia saw the shift in its posture and knew something had happened. "What is it now?" she asked, a sense of dread creeping into her voice. Ash Lucar turned to face her, its crimson eyes holding the cold light of a distant star. Its projected thought was flat, devoid of emotion, but carried the weight of an unavoidable destiny. "The Aura Guardians. They have summoned me to their sanctuary." It paused, the weight of the next words settling on them both. "I am to be put on trial." Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Guardian's Trial. The path to the Aura Guardian sanctuary known as Rhoda was not on any map. It was not a physical road, but a convergence of ley lines, an oral pathway that could only be navigated by those who could feel the pulse of the world. Guided by the summons echoing in its mind, Ash Lucar led Cynthia through a series of translocations, each jump a dizzying tear through the fabric of space. They emerged not in a grand temple, but in a simple, windswept mountain pass, high in a remote range that officially, according to the Sinnoh League cartographers, did not exist. The air here was different. It was clean, pure, and so saturated with calm, disciplined aura that it felt heavy, like walking through water. The sanctuary itself was not built, but carved. A vast, intricate complex honeycombed the inside of the mountain, its gates a simple, unadorned archway that seemed to have been shaped by wind and time. There were no guards, no visible defenses. There didn't need to be. The ambient aura was a shield more potent than any fortress wall. Any being with hostile intent would find themselves disoriented, weakened, and ultimately repelled before they could even find the entrance. As they approached, guardians emerged from the shadows of the rock formations. They moved in silence, their blue robes blending with the twilight hues of the mountain. Their faces were impassive behind their masks, but Ash Lucar could feel their emotions as clearly as if they were shouting. Suspicion, fear, and a cold, disciplined hostility. They formed 2 lines, creating a corridor for the newcomers to walk through. It was not a welcoming party. It was the escort for a prisoner. "They believe I am a disease," Ash Lucar projected to Cynthia, its thought a low, rumbling bassline beneath the hum of the sanctuary. "And this is my quarantine." "Then we'll have to prove the diagnosis is wrong," Cynthia murmured back, her voice a whisper in the thin air. She walked with her head held high, her champions bearing a silent defiance to their judgment. Her Garchomp was not with her. Pokémon were not permitted within the inner sanctum unless summoned for a ritual. The vulnerability was intentional on the Guardian's part, a way to strip visitors of their familiar power. But Cynthia's power was not solely in her partners. It was in her presence, her unshakable confidence that now served as Ash Lucar's shield. They were led through halls of living rock, where veins of luminous blue crystal pulsed with a gentle, rhythmic light. The history of their order was carved into the walls, not as words, but as oral memories. Ash Lucar could feel the echoes of 1,000 generations of guardians. Their triumphs, their sacrifices, their unwavering devotion to a singular, rigid code. It felt the weight of their judgment, the pressure of millennia of tradition pressing in on it. The trial was to be held in the heart of the mountain, a vast, circular chamber known as the Orrery. The ceiling was a dome of polished obsidian that perfectly mirrored the night sky, constellations shifting in patterns that had not been seen in the world for 10,000 years. In the center of the room, 5 high-backed chairs of carved stone were arranged in a semicircle. These were for the Elder Council. Seated in the central, most ornate chair was Kale. He was not wearing his simple acolyte robes now, but the formal, silver-embroidered vestments of a master. His face was bare, revealing a stern, deeply lined visage and eyes that burned with the conviction of a zealot. The other four elders were ancient, their bodies frail but their oral presence as vast and deep as oceans. They regarded Lucar's arrival with a mixture of profound curiosity and grave concern. Dozens of other guardians lined the chamber's circumference, a silent, masked jury. There was no witness stand, no defendant's table. There was only the open floor. Lucar and Cynthia were led to the center and left there, exposed. Kale rose, his voice resonating with the chamber's perfect acoustics. The entity known as Lucar stands before this council. It is accused of violating the first law of aura, the sanctity of the individual soul. It has performed the forbidden fusion, creating a being of unnatural power that has destabilized the harmony of the world. We are here to judge the nature of this being, and to decide its fate. He began his case, his voice a powerful, persuasive instrument. He was not a ranting fanatic. He was a masterful orator, weaving logic, fear, and tradition into a compelling tapestry of condemnation. He spoke of the balance, the delicate dance of life force that the guardians were sworn to protect. He described the fusion not as an act of desperation, but as one of supreme arrogance. They chose to shatter two complete souls, one human, one Pokemon, to forge a weapon, Kale declared, his gaze sweeping across the assembled guardians. A weapon they believed they could control. But such power is not meant to be controlled by any single being. Its very existence is a beacon, a tear in the natural order that invites chaos. He then played his trump card. With a wave of his hand, a basin in the center of the floor glowed. An image appeared in the air above it. A live oral scan of the Sinnoh region. It was a web of brilliant blue and green lines, the life force of the land. But it was scarred. Dozens of small, angry purple dots festered across the map, the corrupted shrines. This is the harmony the entity has brought us, Kale said, his voice laced with cold fury. Since its creation, our most sacred sites have been attacked, their energy poisoned. It claims to be a savior, but it is a plague, and this corruption is its symptom. It has drawn a great evil to our world, and its power is feeding it. Cynthia stepped forward, her voice clear and cutting, a sharp counterpoint to Kale's resonant sermon. Your accusation relies on a fallacy, Master Kale. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. After this, therefore because of this. You see two events in sequence and assume causation. It is a child's logic. A murmur rippled through the assembled guardians. To have an outsider, a non-aura user, lecture them on logic was an insult. Kale's eyes narrowed. Champion Cynthia, he said, his tone dripping with condescension. Your expertise is in Pokemon battles, not the fundamental laws of reality. You would be wise to remain silent. My expertise is in strategy, Cynthia retorted, unfazed. And I see a flawed strategy in your accusation. You claim this being's existence drew the evil. I propose a more logical sequence. An ancient evil began to stir. A tear in reality, a great devourer, threatened our world. This being was not the cause of the crisis. It was the solution. The fusion was not an act of arrogance. It was an act of sacrifice, the only measure that could prevent the utter annihilation of your precious balance. She pointed to the map. And these attacks, they are not a symptom of its existence. They are the calculated actions of an intelligent enemy who fears it. An enemy who seeks to weaken the world's defenses, to corrupt its power sources, before the world's new protector can rally. Her argument was sound, her logic impeccable. It planted a seed of doubt in the minds of the less zealous guardians and the more analytical elders. Kale's face tightened. He had underestimated her. Your theories are compelling, champion, he sneered. But they are just that. Theories. What we have is fact. An abomination stands before us, and chaos follows in its wake. He turned his attention back to Lucar, his voice dropping to a somber, almost sympathetic tone. We do not wish for your destruction. We wish for restoration. The souls of the boy, Ash Ketchum, and his Lucario still exist within that form. We have rituals, ancient techniques. We can perform a separation. It will be painful, and the outcome, uncertain. But it is the only way to restore the balance. To free them from the prison they have built. He was offering it a choice. Death, or a potential death that he could frame as a merciful release. It was a brilliant political move. Before Cynthia could argue against the perverse logic, Lucar raised a hand. A deep, resonant hum filled the chamber, silencing all whispers. For the first time, it spoke aloud, its harmonious voice filling the space with an undeniable presence. "You speak of us as a prison," it began, its crimson eyes locking onto Kale's. "You are mistaken. We are not a prison. We are a sanctuary." It took a step forward, its presence commanding the absolute attention of every being in the room. Ash Ketchum is not gone. Lucario is not gone. They have been integrated. Their strengths combined, their weaknesses shielded. Do you know what it was like for the boy to feel the world's pain, to feel the life force bleed away at Spear Pillar, and be able to do nothing but erect a shield that was doomed to fail? Do you know what it was like for the Pokémon to pour his entire life force into that shield, knowing it was a futile gesture that would only delay the end by seconds? The questions were not accusatory. They were statements of fact, of experience. Separately, they were heroes. But they were limited. They were destined to die on that mountain, a noble but ultimately meaningless sacrifice. Together, we are something more. We are what the world needs right now. Not a keeper of old traditions, Kale. But a shield against a storm you have not even begun to comprehend. It paused, letting its words settle. You offer to separate us. You offer to kill the being that stands before you for the chance to bring back two beings who would have died anyway. You would sacrifice the certain for the possible, all to satisfy a law written when the world was a different place. That is not wisdom, it is fear. Its statement was a quiet, devastating rebuttal of Kale's entire worldview. It hadn't pleaded. It hadn't argued. It had simply stated the truth of its existence with a clarity that was impossible to refute. The chamber was utterly silent. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. Cynthia allowed herself a small, hidden smile of pride. Kale was momentarily speechless, his zealous certainty shaken by the being's calm, unshakable logic. He was about to retort, to fall back on the dogma that was his only remaining defense, when a piercing, high-pitched alarm shrieked through the sanctuary. It was a sound that had not been heard in over a century, the outer perimeter breach alarm. The serene, pulsing blue light of the crystals in the walls instantly turned a flashing, urgent red. The constellations on the ceiling vanished, replaced by a tactical map of the mountain, showing a single, massive hostile entity at their very gates. "Impossible!" one of the elders exclaimed, rising from his seat. "Nothing can approach Rhoda undetected. And nothing hostile can breach the oral barrier," another added, his voice trembling with disbelief. On the screen, the hostile symbol, a jagged crimson spike, slammed against the shimmering blue dome that represented the sanctuary's shield. The dome flickered violently. "Report!" Kale roared, his authority reasserting itself in the crisis. A guardian from the upper observation deck appeared as a holographic image in the center of the room. He was kneeling, his mask cracked, and the wall behind him was a mess of shattered rock. "Master Kale, I don't know what it is. It looks like a registeel, but it's wrong. Corrupted. Our barriers, they're not holding. The negative energy it radiates, it's negating our aura." A deafening boom echoed from the mountain's peak, shaking the orrery itself. Dust and small pebbles rained down from the ceiling. The holographic image fizzled out. Kale did not hesitate. The trial was forgotten, the ideological battle rendered meaningless in the face of an existential threat. All guardians to defensive positions. Elders, we must reinforce the core shield. The orrery is the heart of the sanctuary. If it falls, the mountain falls. The chamber erupted into disciplined chaos. Guardians filed out, moving with practiced speed to their assigned posts. The 5 elders, Kale included, moved to the center of the room, forming a circle. They raised their hands and a massive, brilliant dome of blue energy formed, reinforcing the sanctuary's primary shield from within. Ash, Lucario and Cynthia were forgotten, left standing alone as the world shook around them. Its energy signature, Ash Lucario projected to Cynthia, its eyes fixed on the tactical map. "It's the same as the Pokémon in the sea cave. But 100 times stronger. This isn't a probe. This is a siege engine." Another titanic boom rocked the foundation, more powerful than the last. The blue dome of the elders flickered violently, and one of them cried out in pain as the feedback surged through him. "Their defenses are failing," Cynthia observed, her mind coolly assessing the situation. "The enemy is using an energy that is the antithesis of aura. They're trying to fight a fire by throwing more wood on it." "Precisely," Ash Lucario replied. "They are fighting with the wrong weapon." Without another word, it moved. It strode past the straining elders, its steps sure and steady amidst the chaos. Entity. What are you doing? Kale grunted, sweat beading on his forehead as he poured his energy into the shield. Stay here, you are not. He couldn't finish. Ash Lucar didn't break its stride. It walked to the edge of the chamber, to a wall that showed the outside world like a massive screen. It saw the creature. It was a registeel, but a grotesque parody of one. Its metallic body was a patchwork of rusted, jagged plates, held together by pulsating veins of sickly purple energy. Its single red eye had been replaced by a swirling vortex of the same corrupting force. It was less a Pokemon and more a demonic suit of armor, animated by pure malevolence. It raised its colossal arms and brought them crashing down on the sanctuary's shield again. The world buckled. Ash Lucar took a deep breath. It did not gather aura in the way the Guardians did, drawing it into a focused point. Instead, it opened itself up, becoming a conduit. The calm, powerful energy of the sanctuary itself, the energy the Guardians were trying to use as a shield, flowed into it. You cannot fight darkness with light, its voice echoed in the chamber, for all to hear. You can only illuminate it. Then it took a step forward and walked through the chamber wall, phasing through solid rock as if it were smoke, and appeared on the mountainside, directly in the path of the corrupted registeel. The creature paused its assault, its vortex eye fixing on the new arrival. It registered Ash Lucar as the greatest threat. Inside, the Guardians and Elders watched in stunned silence. Folly. It will be destroyed. One elder gasped. But Ash Lucar was not preparing to fight. Not in a way they understood. It began to issue commands, its voice resonating not just in the orrery, but in the minds of every guardian in the sanctuary. Master Kale, Elders. Do not release the shield. Change its frequency. Modulate it to a harmonic that will amplify, not resist, my own aura. Match my resonance. Guardians of the North Corridor. Your traditional aura blasts are useless. They are feeding it. Reform your energy into kinetic pulses. Target its joints. You are not trying to wound it. You are trying to unbalance it. Guardians of the West Spire. Create a resonance cage. Use the crystals in the walls. Do not try to contain the beast. Contain the sound of its impacts. The vibrations are destabilizing the mountain. The orders were precise, unconventional, and displayed a level of tactical understanding that was breathtaking. It wasn't just thinking of the enemy. It was thinking of the environment, of energy frequencies, of the very physics of the battle. Kale, gritting his teeth as he held the shield, was torn. His every instinct screamed to follow the ancient defensive protocols. But he had seen those protocols fail. He had seen the power this entity possessed. And its strategy, it was insane, but it had the chilling ring of truth. Do as it says, Kale roared, making his choice, match its resonance. The elders complied, shifting the frequency of their energy. The shield, which had been a hard, brittle blue, softened to a vibrant, flexible crimson, the same color as Ash Lucar's own aura. Outside, Ash Lucar faced the monster. The corrupted registeel unleashed a beam of pure negative energy from its eye, a blast that would have torn a hole in a battleship. Ash Lucar didn't dodge. It raised a single hand. When the beam struck the newly resonating shield, it didn't shatter. It bent, flowing around the dome like water around a stone, guided by Ash Lucar's will, and harmlessly into the sky. The creature roared in frustration. Following Ash Lucar's commands, the Guardians in the North Corridor fired. Not blasts of blue light, but invisible pulses of pure force. They slammed into the registeel's knee and shoulder joints. The colossal beast stumbled, its balance thrown off. At the same time, the Guardians in the West Spire created their resonance cage. The next time the registeel slammed its fists against the shield, the catastrophic, mountain-shaking boom was muffled, reduced to a dull thud. The tide of the battle had shifted in less than 30 seconds. Now, Ash Lucar went on the offensive. It didn't charge. It flowed. It moved with a speed that made the elite Guardians look like amateurs, its form a blue streak against the gray rock. It closed the distance to the staggering registeel and leapt, landing on its massive shoulder. It didn't punch. It didn't blast. It placed its palms flat against the corrupted metal plates. You are a guardian of a bygone age, its voice echoed, a lament for the twisted creature. You are a protector. Remember what you are. It didn't just pour in purifying aura, it did what it had tried to do for the crocodile. It reached into the registeel, past the corruption, searching for the spark of the original spirit within. The purple energy fought back, lashing at it, trying to corrupt its very soul. But Ash Lucar's merged consciousness was an unbreachable fortress. It weathered the storm, its focus absolute. It found it. A tiny, flickering ember of the original registeel, trapped, screaming, within the prison of its own body. Ash Lucar poured its energy into that ember. It wasn't a cleansing fire. It was fuel. It was hope. The registeel thrashed, trying to shake the smaller being from its shoulder. But Ash Lucar held firm, its body a conduit for the mountain's own pure energy. The purple veins on the creature's body began to flicker. Patches of its original, gleaming silver color started to break through the rust and corruption. The vortex in its eye wavered, and for a split second, a single, familiar red dot of light appeared. The creature let out a roar that was not of rage, but of agony and conflict. It was fighting itself, the original spirit battling the corruption for control. With a final, convulsive shudder, it ripped Ash Lucar from its shoulder and hurled it through the air. Ash Lucar landed gracefully on a rock outcropping 50 yards away. It was breathing heavily, the effort of the partial cleansing having taken a massive toll. The corrupted registeel, its internal battle still raging, seemed to decide it could not win. It turned, its movements clumsy and broken, and dragged itself away from the sanctuary, disappearing over the ridge of the mountain. It had been repelled. Silence fell over the mountain. Inside the orrery, the guardians and the elders could only stare. The red alert lights faded, returning to a calm, steady blue. The battle was over. They had survived. Not because of their ancient traditions, not because of their defensive protocols, but because they had listened to the very creature they had put on trial. Kale slowly lowered his hands, the great shield dissipating. He looked at his trembling fingers, then at the image of Ash Lucar standing alone on the mountainside. His certainty, the bedrock of his entire life, was shattered. He had been prepared to condemn it, to execute it for the good of the world. And it had just saved them all, with a strategy so advanced, so profound, that he could barely comprehend it. Ash Lucar phased back into the chamber, its movements weary. It looked at the assembled guardians, its crimson eyes holding no triumph. No, I told you so. There was only the quiet, heavy weight of responsibility. Kale met its gaze. The animosity was gone from his eyes, replaced by a complex storm of humility, awe, and a deep, unsettling uncertainty. He, who had been so sure of his righteousness, now knew nothing. He took a slow breath, and in a voice loud enough for the entire chamber to hear, he spoke a single word. The trial is suspended. Cynthia stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the humbled elders before landing on Kale. Her voice was cold, sharp, and final. The trial is over, she corrected him. You are judging the wrong defendant. Your enemy is not in this room. It is out there. And you just saw what it is capable of. She walked to Ash Lucar's side, a clear and unmistakable declaration of her allegiance. Sinnoh is under attack. The world is under attack. And whether you like it or not, you need us. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The corrupted city Jubilife City was the beating heart of Sinnoh, a modern metropolis of glass, steel, and bustling energy. To the human eye, it was a testament to progress and cooperation. To Ash Lucar's senses, it was a city running a fever. It stood with Cynthia on the balcony of a luxury penthouse suite she had secured for them, overlooking the sprawling urban landscape. The sounds of traffic, the chatter of thousands of people, the electronic pulse of the city's massive video screens, it was a cacophony. But beneath it all, it could feel something else, a dissonant, ugly hum. It was the collective emotional output of a million lives, but it was curdled, soured. The usual mix of joy, ambition, and everyday stress was being drowned out by a rising tide of irritability, suspicion, and a low, simmering anger. It's like the sound of a million nails scraping on slate, Ash Lucar projected, its thought tinged with discomfort. Its crimson eyes scanned the crowds below, seeing them not as people, but as flickering oral signatures, most of them tinged with a faint, agitated gray. They're all on edge. Angry at nothing and everything. Cynthia, leaning against the railing beside it, held a data slate. Her approach was more clinical, but her findings were the same. The city's civic data supports what you're feeling. In the last 48 hours, petty crime is up 12%. Traffic incidents are up 20%. The number of official complaints filed for everything from noise violations to workplace disputes has tripled. She swiped the screen, bringing up a color-coded map of the city. And the incidents aren't random. They're clustered. Hotspots of negative emotional energy. "This is Niall's work," Ash Lucar stated. It was not a question. The feeling was the same as the desecrated shrine, but diluted, spread thin across an entire population. He called the shrine a beacon. This is what it was broadcasting. Not a signal for followers. A frequency. A virus of the spirit. He's not trying to conquer the city with force, Cynthia reasoned, her strategic mind piecing it together. He's trying to make it rot from the inside out. Turn the city against itself. It's insidious. And it feeds his master, Ash Lucar added, the conclusion chilling. Malachor didn't just thrive on grand acts of evil. It fed on the mundane, everyday misery of millions. We need to find the source. The transmitters. Their investigation began not on the streets, but in the city's digital and oral underbelly. They worked in perfect synergy. Cynthia, using her champion-level clearance, accessed the city's infrastructure schematics, communications grids, power lines, water systems. She became its map, its eyes and ears in the world of data. Ash Lucar, in a deep meditative state on the floor of the penthouse, became the sensor. It detached its consciousness from its own body, letting its aura sense flow through the city like a ghost, hunting for the source of the dissonant frequency. It was like trying to find a single wrong note in a hurricane of sound. For hours, it sifted through the emotional chaos, tracing threads of anger and fear back to their sources, only to find them leading to mundane squabbles or legitimate frustrations. But slowly, a pattern began to emerge. The hotspots Cynthia had identified on her map all shared a common feature. They were near major pieces of public infrastructure. The Jubilife TV station, Ash Lucar's thoughts suddenly came, sharp and focused. The main broadcast tower. There's a nexus of the corrupting energy there. It's faint, but it's piggybacking on the broadcast signal. Cynthia's fingers flew across her slate. She pulled up the tower's blueprints. The highest maintenance platform. There's a signal amplifier up there for boosting public service announcements. An emotional amplifier, now, Ash Lucar corrected. Getting there was the next challenge. A frontal assault was out of the question. They couldn't risk a public confrontation. This required stealth. That night, under the cloak of darkness, two shadows moved across the rooftops of Jubilife. Ash Lucar moved with a supernatural grace, its powerful form a blur in the neon-lit gloom. Cynthia, surprisingly agile and athletic, followed, her dark coat making her nearly invisible. This was a side of the champion few ever saw, not the elegant public figure, but the resourceful, hands-on operative. They reached the base of the TV station, a colossal spire of steel that pierced the clouds. Bypassing security was trivial. A focused pulse of aura from Ash Lucar fried the camera feeds for a crucial 10 seconds. A code Cynthia had procured from her contacts gave them access to a service elevator. They ascended in silence, the city shrinking below them. The maintenance platform was a windswept cage of metal near the tower's peak. In the center, attached to the legitimate broadcast amplifier, was a small, black device, no bigger than a fist. It was featureless, save for a single, pulsating purple rune that glowed with a faint, sickly light. It was humming, not with electronic energy, but with a vile, concentrated malice. As Ash Lucar approached it, the low-grade hum in its mind intensified into a piercing shriek. It was a psychic defense mechanism. It felt a sudden, overwhelming wave of pure despair wash over it. Memories, not its own, flooded its mind. The loneliness of a lost child, the bitterness of a failed artist, the rage of a betrayed lover. It was the concentrated emotional filth of the city, weaponized. It staggered, a hand flying to its head, a low groan escaping its lips. The sheer volume of the psychic noise was overwhelming. For a moment, the two souls within it felt the strain of their union, the chaos threatening to pull them apart. Cynthia was at its side instantly. She didn't speak, she didn't offer words of encouragement that would be useless against such an assault. Instead, she did something simple, something human. She placed her hand firmly on its shoulder. The physical contact was an anchor in the storm of psychic energy. It was a single, clear, steady sensation in the chaos. Her aura was calm, a pool of unwavering resolve. Ash Lucar focused on that feeling, on the warmth of her hand, the quiet strength in her presence. It used her as a focal point. a lighthouse to navigate the storm in its head. The wave of despair receded, beaten back by its immense willpower. It gave Cynthia a grateful nod, a silent acknowledgement of her crucial support. Then it turned back to the device. It didn't try to smash it. It placed its hand over the pulsating rune and poured a controlled stream of its own aura into it, overriding the corrupting frequency. The purple light sputtered and died. The psychic shriek vanished. One down. The relief in the city's overall aural field was immediate, like a single tight knot being loosened, but it wasn't enough. There are more, it projected, its thought tired but firm. At least 2 others. The city waterworks and the magnet train central station. As they worked, however, they were no longer unnoticed. Their silent infiltration had tripped alarms that, while bypassed electronically, had alerted a very human element. Commander Riker, head of Jubilife's public security force, was a man who believed in order above all else. A former soldier, he saw the world in black and white. Rules and chaos. He was a good man, a dedicated public servant, but his worldview was rigid. And in the emotionally charged atmosphere of the city, his rigidity was calcifying into aggressive paranoia. His screens showed him camera feeds being mysteriously wiped, high security areas being accessed by ghost codes. He saw the small but measurable dip in civic disruption after the incident at the TV tower. He didn't see it as a problem being solved. He saw it as a hostile entity manipulating his city's infrastructure. These vigilantes, whoever they were a threat to his control, to his order. He began to hunt them. Ash, Lucario and Cynthia disabled the second device at the waterworks, hidden within a filtration tank. The emotional assault was stronger this time, a wave of sickening apathy and exhaustion that it had to fight through. Again, Cynthia's presence was the anchor that kept it steady. But as they left, they were nearly caught. Riker's teams were closing in, faster and more coordinated than they should have been. The city itself seemed to be working against them. He's using predictive policing algorithms, Cynthia noted as they hid in the shadows of an alleyway, watching a squad of police cruisers speed past. The system is analyzing our movements, predicting our next target. But the machine is as paranoid as he is. It's flagging us as a top-tier terrorist threat. The final device, Ash Lucario said, its gaze turning towards the glittering heart of the city. It is the hub. The one that controls the others. And it is in the most logical, most public, most heavily defended place possible. The central square of Jubilife City was a marvel of urban planning, a wide-open plaza centered around the magnificent fountain of bliss. Water jets danced in time with holographic projections, and crowds of people constantly flowed through it. It was also a security fortress, with cameras on every angle and security posts at every corner. And at the heart of the fountain, integrated into its central spire, Ash Lucario could feel it. The primary amplifier, the source of the city's fever, pulsing like a malignant heart. There was no way to approach it with stealth. Then we do it openly, Ash Lucario declared, its tone shifting from that of a silent operative to a decisive commander. We walk in, we disable it, and we walk out. Riker will be waiting, Cynthia warned. He'll see it as a direct challenge to his authority. His authority is already compromised by the very thing we're trying to destroy, it countered. It's time to stop running. Their walk into the square was surreal. The moment they stepped into the open, they were made. Alarms blared. Steel barricades slammed down, sealing the exits. On the massive public view screens that lined the surrounding buildings, their images appeared, labeled with the words, "Public threat." The crowds, already agitated and paranoid, turned on them. Shouts of fear and anger filled the air. They were surrounded, not just by police, but by a populace that had been subtly manipulated into seeing them as the enemy. From behind a line of riot shields, Commander Riker emerged, his face a mask of grim determination. He was flanked by a dozen officers and their Pokémon, powerful Arcanine, brawny Machoke, their growls and stances aggressive. In the name of the Jubilife City Security Force, I order you to surrender. Riker's voice boomed over a loudspeaker, amplified by the very system they were there to save. You are under arrest for acts of civic terrorism. Commander, you are being manipulated. Cynthia called out, stepping forward. There is a device in that fountain poisoning the minds of everyone in this city, including yours. Lies. Riker roared, his paranoia now at a fever pitch. The amplifier was working overtime, feeding on the chaos of the confrontation. You are the poison. You are the chaos. Take them down. The battle was instant and overwhelming. The Arcanine unleashed a coordinated wave of flamethrowers. The Machoke charged, their fists glowing with the energy of karate chops. Officers fired stun nets. Ash Lucario moved. It didn't attack. It defended. It slammed its palms on the ground, and a dome of crimson aura erupted around itself and Cynthia, the flames and nets splashing harmlessly against it. It was a perfect, impenetrable shield. But it was static. It couldn't hold it forever and disable the device. It needed to end this, not by winning the fight, but by changing its nature. With a deafening roar, it dropped the shield and leapt. Its powerful legs launched it high into the air, over the heads of the charging Machoke, over the lines of police. It twisted mid-air, a marvel of acrobatic grace, and landed squarely on the central spire of the Fountain of Bliss, right beside the hidden, humming amplifier. Every weapon, every Pokémon, immediately turned its fire on it, but they were too late. Ash Lucario plunged its hand into the fountain's spire, its claws tearing through the decorative metal and gripping the black, pulsating device within. The psychic shriek it unleashed was 1,000 times worse than before, a concentrated blast of every negative emotion in Jubilife. It was a physical blow. The merged entity's vision went white, its body convulsing from the sheer psychic agony. For a moment, it faltered. Kale's words echoed in its mind, unstable, abomination. Riker's shouts, public threat, poison. The hate from the crowd below. It felt the crushing weight of a world that feared it. Then, it felt Cynthia. She wasn't fighting. She and her Garchomp were standing their ground, not attacking, but creating a defensive line, protecting the civilians from the crossfire. Her calm presence a singular point of sanity in the chaos. She trusted it. That trust was the anchor it needed. It gritted its teeth, its resolve hardening into a diamond point. It wasn't here to destroy the device. It was here to hijack it. It didn't fight the psychic energy. It absorbed it. It drew all the hate, fear, and anger into itself, a terrifying torrent of psychic poison. Its body trembled violently, veins of crimson aura flaring all over its form as it processed the onslaught. Then, with a great, silent roar that was felt, not heard, it reversed the flow. It poured its own aura out through the device. A pure, potent, crimson wave of energy, carrying not a command, but a feeling. Calm, clarity, peace. The wave erupted from the fountain, silent and invisible. It washed over the city square in an instant. It flowed through the network, from the fountain to the waterworks, to the TV tower, using Malicor's own system against it. The effect was instantaneous. The angry shouts from the crowd died in their throats, replaced by confused murmurs. The man who had been ready to throw a rock suddenly looked at it in his hand as if he had no idea how it got there. The Arcanine stopped breathing fire, their bodies relaxing, their tails giving a hesitant wag. The Machoke halted their charge, shaking their heads as if waking from a dream. Commander Riker froze, his hand raised in the command to attack. The furious paranoia in his eyes vanished. Like a fog burning off in the morning sun, it was replaced by a wave of utter, horrified bewilderment. He looked at Ash Lucario, standing godlike on the fountain. He looked at the champion, Cynthia, holding a protective stance. He looked at his own officers, poised to attack. He didn't understand what had just happened, but he understood, with a sickening certainty, that he had been on the verge of making a catastrophic mistake. The last of the purifying wave dissipated. The hum of malice that had plagued the city was gone. There was only the gentle sound of the fountain's water. On the spire, Ash Lucario's strength finally gave out. The effort of absorbing and converting so much negative energy had been monumental. It collapsed to one knee, its powerful form slumping, its breathing ragged. Cynthia was moving before anyone else. She recalled her Garchomp and ran to the fountain, her usual grace replaced by an urgent, protective instinct. She reached its side, placing a supportive hand on its back as it knelt, exhausted, in the center of the now silent square. It was a public, undeniable statement of their partnership. Riker slowly lowered his hand, his face pale with shame. He gave a sharp, curt signal to his forces. "Stand down," he commanded, his voice hoarse. "All units, stand down." The citizens, the police, the Pokémon, all stood in the silent square, staring up at the two figures at the heart of their city. The images on the giant screens no longer said public threat. They simply showed the scene. The exhausted, strange being, and the steadfast champion at its side. They had not seen a monster. They had witnessed a miracle. Ash Lucar looked out at the sea of faces, no longer seeing the flickering gray of agitation, but the clear, calm auras of confusion, relief, and a dawning, wondrous awe. It looked at Cynthia, her hand a steady, grounding presence on its back. They had won. But it knew, with a certainty that chilled its very soul, that this was just one city. Malicor's strategy was now clear. It wasn't just attacking their sacred places. It was attacking their society, their civilization, their very way of life. The next battle might not be in a forgotten ruin or a gleaming metropolis, but in the hearts and minds of everyone. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Alley from the Past. The world was getting sick. It was a subtle corruption, a blight that couldn't be seen by the average person, but to Ash Lucar's senses, it was an ever-present, creeping dread. As they traveled north from Jubilife, leaving the cities and civilization behind, the sickness became more apparent. The oral signature of the ancient forests was muted, the vibrant green of life force tinged with a weary, listless gray. Pokémon, normally teeming with activity, were scarce, their energy signatures withdrawn and fearful. The very air felt tired. Malicor's influence, radiating from the desecrated shrines and the now cleansed city, was not a fast-acting poison, but a slow, systemic infection, weakening the world's spirit. Their destination was a place of immense life, perhaps the most vital nexus of aura on the entire planet. The Tree of Beginning. It was a journey of several days, a silent pilgrimage through the ailing land. They traveled on foot, a deliberate choice. Ash Lucar needed to feel the pulse of the earth, to understand the scope of the damage, and Cynthia, ever the pragmatist, knew that flying would attract the wrong kind of attention. The Aura Guardians were silent, but they were surely watching. During the days, they walked. During the nights, they made camp under the stars, the silence between them no longer awkward, but comfortable. It was in these quiet moments that the lines of their partnership began to blur into something deeper. One evening, as Cynthia tended a small, crackling fire, she watched Ash Lucar, who sat meditating on a nearby rock outcropping. Its form was still, but she could feel the immense, restless energy cycling within it. It never truly slept. It was a constant guardian, a constant processor of the world's pain. "Does it ever stop?" she asked softly, her voice barely disturbing the quiet of the forest. The noise. The feeling of everything. Ash Lucar's eyes opened, the crimson glow soft in the firelight. It turned its head, its gaze meeting hers. For a moment, its mental voice was not a single, resonant tone, but a fleeting harmony of two distinct but intertwined thoughts. "It's loud," came the echo of Ash's familiar determination, now colored with a profound weariness. "But we're getting used to it." "The silence is what is frightening," added the deeper, more ancient tone of Lucario's spirit. "Silence means the life has faded." The brief, clear separation of the two souls was a rare glimpse into the core of its being, a moment of startling vulnerability. It was a reminder to Cynthia that inside the powerful, decisive entity was still the boy she'd met years ago, and the fiercely loyal Pokémon who had been his partner. She found herself feeling a pang of something she couldn't quite name, a protective instinct, a deep empathy for the immense burden it carried. "You don't have to carry it alone," she said, the words simple, but their meaning absolute. Its gaze softened. "We know." The two voices merged back into their singular, harmonious projection, but the connection of that moment lingered in the space between them. They arrived at the Valley of the Tree of Beginning at dawn. The sight was breathtaking and horrifying. The tree itself was a geological impossibility, a colossal crystalline mountain shaped like a great, sprawling organism. It should have been radiating a pure, brilliant aura, a beacon of life visible to Ash Lucar's senses from a continent away. Instead, its light was dim, flickering like a dying candle. A faint, sickly purple haze, like a bruise, clung to its lower regions, and the land around its base was gray and barren. At the entrance to the tree's interior, a cavernous opening shimmering with a faint energy field, a small, pink, cat-like Pokémon lay curled on a rock. It was Mew, the mythical Pokémon that served as the tree's heart and soul. Its usually playful blue eyes were half closed with exhaustion, and its psychic signature, which should have been a supernova of joyful energy, was a weak, struggling pulse. It lifted its head as they approached, a faint, questioning, "Mew?" escaping its lips. Ash Lucar knelt, its large form towering over the small Pokémon. It didn't try to touch Mew. It simply extended its hand, palm up, and projected a wave of calm, reassuring aura. We're here to help. The tree is sick. You are sick. Mew seemed to understand. It floated weakly from its rock and nudged Lucar's hand, a silent plea. It then turned and phased through the shimmering energy field at the cave's entrance, beckoning them to follow. The moment they stepped inside, the pressure intensified 1,000-fold. The air was thick, heavy with a conflict that was both physical and metaphysical. The interior of the tree was a wonderland of glowing crystals and strange, symbiotic life forms. But it was a wonderland under siege. The beautiful, glowing crystals were webbed with the same purple corruption, and the tree's natural defense mechanisms, golem-like antibodies made of rock and crystal, were running rampant. They were attacking not only the purple corruption, but everything, including the tree's own healthy tissue, unable to distinguish friend from foe in their frenzied state. The tree's immune system had been turned against itself. "We have to get to the heart," Cynthia said, her voice tight as she dodged a lurching crystal formation that swiped at her. "Mew is the heart. If we can heal Mew, the tree can heal itself." The journey inward was a treacherous battle. They were not just fighting monsters, they were fighting the very environment. Passageways would seal themselves off with sudden, violent crystal growths. The floor would shift, trying to plunge them into deep chasms. The crystal antibodies, some as large as a house, relentlessly attacked, their movements jerky and unnatural. Cynthia was magnificent. Her melodic moved with serpentine grace, its water attacks blasting apart the more aggressive crystals, while her Garchomp was a whirlwind of destruction, its dragon claws shattering the golem-like antibodies. But for every one they destroyed, 2 more would form. They were fighting a losing battle. Lucar, meanwhile, was fighting on a different front. It moved through the chaos, its focus not on destruction, but on pacification. It would place a hand on a rampaging golem, and instead of shattering it, a wave of its crimson aura would flow into the construct, calming it, momentarily severing its connection to the tree's panicked immune response. The golem would freeze, its violent energy fading, before slowly crumbling back into the tree's substance. It was a far more draining process than simple destruction, but it was not harming the tree. It was trying to cure the fever, not just fight the symptoms. As they pushed deeper, they entered a vast, central chamber, a cavern so large it could have held a small city. The walls were lined with millions of glowing crystals, the memories of the tree. In the center of the cavern, a river of pure, glowing green energy, the tree's lifeblood, flowed sluggishly. But even it was tainted, streaks of sickly purple swirling within it. And there, standing on a crystalline bridge that spanned the river, was a figure. He was tall and wore the archaic blue robes of an ancient Aura Guardian. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. In his hands, he held a staff, and at his side stood a Lucario. Not a physical one, but a translucent, shimmering blue spirit. The man himself was also translucent, a ghost of light and memory, preserved by the power of the tree. It was Sir Aaron, the legendary hero of the ancient kingdom of Rhoda, and he was holding a line. From the far side of the bridge, a tide of purple sludge, a physical manifestation of Malicor's corruption, was trying to cross. Aaron stood as a dam against it. With every swing of his staff, he sent out waves of pure, blue aura, pushing the corruption back. But he was fading. His spiritual form flickered, and with each pulse of his power, he grew a little more transparent. He was fighting a battle he had been waging for centuries, and he was finally beginning to lose. When Lucar and Cynthia entered the chamber, his head snapped up. His eyes, burning with a fierce, ancient light, widened as he saw them. He did not see allies. He saw Lucar's form, a fusion, an abomination, by the standards of his time, and its immense, unfamiliar crimson aura. He saw it standing amidst the chaos of the tree's rampaging antibodies, and he made the logical, disastrously wrong conclusion. "So, the source of the defilement finally reveals itself," his voice echoed, not as sound, but as a powerful, direct oral projection, a voice of command that had once guided armies. "You have twisted this sacred place, beast. You have poisoned the heart of the world. And now you have come to finish the job. You will not succeed." He moved with a speed that defied his spectral nature. He was on them in an instant. His target was not Cynthia, but Lucar. His staff became a blur, a whirlwind of precise, deadly strikes. It was not a battle of brute force. It was a duel of masters. Lucar met the assault. It did not use its bone spikes or raw power. It used its hands, its feet, its body, flowing around Aaron's attacks, redirecting, parrying, and blocking with an efficiency that was breathtaking. The clang of Aaron's aura-wreathed staff against Lucar's forearm echoed through the cavern. Blue sparks flared against crimson. It was a clash of eras, of philosophies. Aaron's style was rigid, traditional, every movement perfected through a lifetime of disciplined practice. Lucar's was fluid, unpredictable, a seamless blend of human ingenuity and Pokemon instinct. "Listen to me," Cynthia shouted, but her voice was lost in the storm of their battle. Her Pokemon were busy holding off the crystal golems that were still pouring into the chamber. "Your power is immense," Aaron projected, his spectral form a whirlwind of motion as he pressed his attack. "But it is unnatural. A perversion of the sacred gift. You are all chaos and raw energy. You have no discipline." He spun his staff, gathering his energy for a powerful attack. A massive sphere of brilliant blue aura formed at its tip. "This ends now." He unleashed the aura sphere. It was not the simple projectile of a Pokemon. It was a complex, woven ball of energy, humming with the power to level half the chamber. Lucar did not try to block it or dodge it. It stood its ground. It raised its hands, and a vortex of its own crimson aura formed between them. As the blue aura sphere slammed into it, the vortex did not shatter. It absorbed it. The blue energy was drawn in, spun around, and integrated into the crimson. Lucar's form glowed with a new, intense light, a mixture of the two colors. Then, it opened its hands and released the energy, not as a blast, but as a single, perfectly controlled, pencil-thin beam of violet light. The beam shot past Sir Aaron, not hitting him, but striking the crystalline bridge just behind him. The purple sludge that had been creeping across the bridge was instantly vaporized. A clean, cauterized line burned into the stone. The cavern fell silent. The battle stopped. Sir Aaron stood, his staff lowered, his spectral form flickering with shock. He had just used one of his most powerful attacks, and this being had not only absorbed it effortlessly but had reshaped it and used it with a level of precision he had never witnessed. And it had not attacked him. It had attacked his enemy. He had been wrong. Lucar lowered its hands, its body still humming with residual power. "The corruption is the enemy," it projected, its tone calm, respectful, but firm. "Not us. We are fighting the same battle." Sir Aaron stared, his ancient eyes finally seeing past the unfamiliar form to the truth within. He saw the harmony of the two souls, the unwavering purity of their intent. He saw a power that was not a perversion, but an evolution. He slowly, reverently, bowed his head. "Forgive me," he projected, his tone laced with a humility that came from true wisdom. "My long isolation has narrowed my vision. I have not seen a power like yours since." He trailed off, his gaze becoming distant. The truce was fragile. The purple corruption began to creep across the bridge again. "We don't have time for this," Cynthia called out, as Garchomp shattered another golem. "The tree is dying." "She is right," Aaron said, turning his attention back to the true threat. "My power is nearly spent. I can no longer hold it back." He looked at Lucar. "But perhaps, together." Suddenly, the sluggish river of the tree's lifeblood began to churn violently. The purple corruption within it coalesced, rising from the surface like a foul miasma. It took shape. A towering, shadowy form, vaguely humanoid but with long, grasping tendrils of black energy. It had no face, only a swirling vortex of despair where its head should be. It was a phantom, a direct manifestation of Malicor's will, drawn to the concentration of powerful auras in the chamber. The phantom unleashed a psychic scream that was pure, weaponized hopelessness. The crystal golems shattered. Cynthia's Pokemon cried out in pain, clutching their heads. Cynthia herself fell to one knee, her face pale, her mind assaulted by images of her own failures, her deepest fears. Even Sir Aaron's spiritual form flickered violently, as if the very concept of despair was poison to his memory-based existence. Only Lucar remained standing, though its form trembled with the effort. Its merged consciousness, its perfect balance of human empathy and Pokemon spirit, was uniquely suited to resist such an attack. "Aaron," it projected, its voice a commanding clarion call that cut through the psychic static. "It cannot be destroyed by force. It must be contained. Can you create a prison?" Sir Aaron, shaking off the phantom's influence, seemed to find a new reserve of strength. He nodded, his eyes burning with renewed purpose. The ancient rites, the seal of the first guardians. It requires a massive amount of energy, more than I have. Then use mine. It was a plan born of desperation and instinct. Ash Lucar turned to face the phantom. Sir Aaron floated to its side. Cynthia, seeing their intent, grit her teeth against the waves of despair and shouted to her partners. Garchomp. Melodic. Protect them. Buy them time. Her Pokémon, loyal to the very end, rallied. They formed a protective wall, unleashing their most powerful attacks to keep the phantom's grasping tendrils at bay. Sir Aaron placed a translucent hand on Ash Lucar's shoulder. Open your soul to me. Let our aura flow as one. Ash Lucar did. It dropped all its defenses, opening a conduit between itself and the ancient spirit. It felt Aaron's aura, calm, ancient, and incredibly complex, a tapestry woven with 1,000 forgotten techniques. Aaron, in turn, felt the raw, boundless power of the merged being, a supernova of life force. He drew upon that power, his own form glowing with a brilliant, solid light he had not possessed in centuries. He began to chant in the old tongue, his oral voice weaving an intricate cage of light in the air. Blue lines of energy shot from his staff, forming a complex, three-dimensional array of runes around the thrashing phantom. The seal of the first guardians. The phantom shrieked, realizing it was being trapped. It focused its full power on Ash Lucar, the source of the energy that was imprisoning it. The psychic assault intensified. Ash Lucar's mind was flooded with the image of Pikachu, hurt and dying. The image of its mother, crying. The faces of all its friends, turning away in fear and disgust at what it had become. It faltered. The flow of energy to Sir Aaron wavered, the light of the cage flickered. Do not listen to the shadow's lies. Aaron's voice boomed in its mind. Remember who you are. You are not one soul, but two, bound by a love that is stronger than any despair. You are the hope of this world. You are the twin soul. Twin soul. The words resonated deep within the merged consciousness. It wasn't an abomination. It was a prophecy. A purpose. The image of Cynthia's trusting face, her hand on its shoulder in the dark of the TV tower, flashed in its mind. The memory of Lucario's unwavering resolve at Spear Pillar. The memory of Ash's promise to his very first Pokémon. Love. Trust. Connection. These were its anchors. Its true power. It let out a silent roar, a declaration of its own existence, and unleashed its full power. A torrent of pure, brilliant crimson aura, cleansed of all doubt and fear, poured into Sir Aaron. The cage of light flared, solidifying into a diamond-hard prison of pure energy. It contracted, compressing the shadow phantom, squeezing the despair out of it. The phantom shrieked, dissolving, its essence not destroyed, but purified, its negative energy breaking down and being rendered inert by the overwhelming positive force. With a final, silent implosion, it was gone. The cavern was silent. The oppressive psychic pressure vanished. The river of lifeblood began to flow freely, the last of the purple taint fading away. The tree let out a collective, world-spanning sigh of relief. Sir Aaron's form was now perilously faint, the effort having consumed the last of his borrowed energy. Ash Lucar, too, was drained, its body slumping to the ground. Cynthia rushed to its side, her face etched with concern. You are, the one from the prophecy, Aaron projected, his voice a faint whisper now. The twin soul, human and Pokémon, heart and spirit, merged as one, the only power that can truly cleanse the great devourer. He began to fade, his light dimming. I do not have much time. What was sealed once has returned. You call it Malachor. We called it, the silent hunger. It does not conquer. It consumes. It seeks to absorb all life, all aura, to become God. A God of perfect, silent emptiness. He reached out a fading hand, and a single, glowing blue crystal materialized from his essence and floated into Ash Lucar's hand. It was a memory crystal, containing all his knowledge. The old techniques, my knowledge, it is yours now. The prophecy did not say how to win. Only that the twin soul was our only chance. You are not a weapon. You are a key. You must learn to unlock. His voice faded into nothing. Sir Aaron, the hero of old, his duty finally done, dissolved into motes of blue light that flowed into the tree, becoming one with its memory. Ash Lucar closed its hand around the warm crystal. The exhaustion was immense, but for the first time since its creation, it felt a sense of clarity. It was not a monster. It was not an accident. It had a purpose, a destiny written in the annals of history. Mew, now glowing with its full, playful power, zipped around the chamber, its happy cries echoing off the now healthy crystals. It darted over to Lucario and Cynthia, nudging them both gratefully before turning and leading them out of the now healing tree. As they emerged back into the sunlight, the world felt different. The air was cleaner, the land around the tree of beginning already showing faint signs of returning life. They had won a major victory, healing one of the planet's most powerful life centers. But with Sir Aaron's knowledge now resting in its soul, Lucario understood the true scale of the war they were fighting. This was not a battle for a region. It was a battle for the soul of the world, against an ancient, hungry god. And it, the twin soul, was the only thing standing in its way. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6, The Unraveling Conspiracy. The knowledge from Sir Aaron's memory crystal was not a gentle stream. It was a deluge. As they journeyed back toward civilization, Lucario spent hours in a deep meditative trance, its physical body carried by Cynthia's dragonite, while its consciousness navigated the labyrinth of the ancient guardian's life. It witnessed the first war against the silent hunger, saw the desperate forging of the seals, and learned the forgotten aura techniques used to combat an enemy that fed on emotion and life itself. But the most chilling revelations were not about the distant past. They were about the enemy's methods. Malachor had not been sealed by brute force alone. It had been betrayed from within its own ranks. A faction of its followers, horrified by its ultimate goal of total silent emptiness, had helped the Guardians weave the final seals. The lesson was clear. Malachor did not rely solely on corrupted monsters and shadowed agents like Nile. It built conspiracies. It found the cracks in any organization, any society, and inserted wedges of ideology, turning its victims into willing accomplices. It's not just attacking from the outside, Lucario's voice projected into Cynthia's mind as they flew over the endless green expanse of the forests. Its physical body did not stir, but its mental presence was sharp, honed by Aaron's knowledge. It has allies. Here. Now. Humans. They're helping it. Cynthia, flying alongside on her Garchomp, turned her head, the wind whipping at her long hair. You mean Nile's followers? More than that. Nile is an agent, a field commander. I'm talking about something deeper, an infrastructure. Sir Aaron's memories show that Malachor's greatest strength is its ability to offer a compelling lie. To those who fear chaos, it offers absolute order. To those who have suffered loss, it offers a world without pain. It finds the disillusioned and the powerful, and it turns them. It paused, the weight of the implication settling. The attacks on the shrines, the corruption of Jubilife, they were too coordinated, too efficient. Someone with inside knowledge of regional infrastructure and aura-sensitive locations had to be helping them. Cynthia's face hardened as she processed the grim logic. There was only one organization with that level of inter-regional knowledge and authority: the Pokémon League. It was a terrifying thought. The very institution they served, the symbol of unity and cooperation in their world, could be harboring a cancer. Their strategy had to shift. Fighting monsters was straightforward. Fighting a conspiracy, an idea, required a different kind of warfare. Their first stop was not a battlefield, but the digital one. Using Cynthia's high-level clearance and a secure terminal in the Orberg City Library, they dove into the League's internal networks. Cynthia was the navigator, her fingers flying across the holographic keyboard, slicing through firewalls and access protocols. Lucario was the bloodhound. It couldn't read digital data, but it could sense the oral residue left by the people who had accessed it. Every file, every memo, every transfer of funds had a faint emotional echo left by its author. Most of it was a sea of mundane bureaucratic energy, boredom, ambition, stress. But as they dug deeper, into restricted files concerning geological surveys of areas near the aura shrines and cross-regional security protocols, they began to find it. A faint, recurring signature. It was an aura that felt hollowed out, devoid of strong emotion, unnaturally calm, like a placid lake where nothing lived. It was the signature of someone who had embraced Nile's philosophy of nihilism, someone who had willingly excised their own passions. This signature was on transfer orders that had pulled security patrols away from the shrines just before they were attacked. It was on geological survey approvals that perfectly matched the locations of Malachor's energy amplifiers. I've isolated the access credentials tied to the signature, Cynthia said, her voice low and tense. It's not a single person. It's a group, highly placed, using a shared ghost network within the League's own servers. They call themselves the Argent Society. Before they could dig any deeper, an alert flashed on Cynthia's screen. It wasn't from the League. It was from one of her own personal informants. The message was short and cryptic. Rhoda is on the move. Hardliners, not diplomats. Target: Sunny Shore Solar Fields. They believe it's a power source for the corruption. Ash Lucar let out a frustrated sigh, a gust of wind in the quiet library. Kale, it projected, the name a curse. His fear is making him reckless. He sees the symptoms, not the cause, and he's using a hammer to perform surgery. Cynthia's strategic mind instantly saw the three-way conflict laid bare. They, the Argent Society, and Kale's Guardians were all moving pieces on the same board, but playing different games. A direct confrontation was what the enemy wanted: chaos, conflict, a chance for the society to further consolidate its power while the heroes fought amongst themselves. We can't let Kale derail this, Cynthia said, her decision swift. He'll cause a massive incident, turn the public against the concept of Aura users, and play right into the society's hands. But we can't confront him directly. He won't listen. She looked at Ash Lucar, an idea forming in her eyes. But we have something he doesn't: the truth. Their plan was a gamble. Kale was moving on Sunnyshore, expecting to find a nest of corrupted energy. He would find something, but it wouldn't be what he expected. Using the information they'd gathered, Cynthia rerouted a series of power conduits and data relays from a legitimate, high-security League server farm through the Sunnyshore facility. A server farm they now knew was a central communications hub for the Argent Society. Then, Ash Lucar did something only it could do. It reached out with its aura and subtly amplified the hollow signature of the Society's network, making the Sunnyshore facility light up on the Guardian's aural sensors like a beacon of malevolent energy. They had laid the perfect bait. As Kale and a dozen of his elite Guardians descended on the Sunnyshore coast, ready for a spiritual battle, they were met not by corrupted Pokémon, but by a detachment of the Pokémon League's elite guard, alerted by an anonymous tip from Cynthia. The confrontation was tense, a standoff between League authority and ancient tradition. Kale, blinded by his conviction, ordered his Guardians to push through. The resulting skirmish was brief, chaotic, and ended with Kale and his followers being taken into League custody for trespassing and assaulting League officials. It was a messy, diplomatically disastrous event, but it achieved its purpose. Kale was sidelined, his brute force approach neutralized without a true battle. More importantly, during the raid, the Guardians had seized the servers. The physical evidence. Kale, in his blind zeal, had inadvertently become their unwitting pawn. The Argent Society's primary communications hub was now in League hands, and while the encrypted data would be nearly impossible to crack, the hardware itself could be traced. The conspiracy had been dealt a blow, and they didn't even know who had struck them. Now, it was time for the next move. The Society is a headless snake for now, Cynthia said, as they watched the news reports of the Sunnyshore incident from a quiet cafe. But they'll regroup. And they're not the true head of the beast. We need to alert the other leaders. The other champions. We can't fight this alone, and we can't trust the League's official channels. She made the calls. To Lance, the stoic and powerful champion of Kanto and Johto. To Stephen Stone, the calm, analytical champion of Hoenn. To Diantha, the graceful and perceptive champion of Kalos. She didn't explain everything, only that there was a threat to the world that went beyond regional disputes, a threat that required their immediate and absolute secrecy. She proposed a summit. A neutral ground. The Indigo Plateau Conference Hall, the most secure and historically significant building in the Pokémon world. 2 days later, the leaders of the Pokémon world were gathered. The circular conference room was designed for parity, a modern round table where no one sat at the head. Lance was there, his signature cape draped over his chair, his Dragonite standing like a statue behind him. Stephen sat opposite, calmly polishing a geode, his Metagross a silent, gleaming titan in the corner. Diantha was flanked by her elegant Gardevoir, her expression thoughtful and serious. Chairman Prescott, the elderly and universally respected head of the League's Inter-Regional Affairs Committee, presided, his gentle, grandfatherly face a mask of concern. Their highest-level aides and security details lined the walls. It was the most powerful collection of people on the planet. Cynthia began, laying out their findings with cold, hard precision. She spoke of the rift at Spear Pillar, the rise of Malachor, the attacks on the shrines, the events in Jubilife, and the evidence of the Argent Society's conspiracy within the League itself. She presented the data from the seized servers, showing the untraceable communications and suspicious resource allocations. The room was heavy with disbelief and shock. A conspiracy within the League? Lance's voice was a low growl. Cynthia, these are incredible accusations. You are suggesting treason at the highest levels. I am stating facts, Lance, Cynthia replied coolly. The evidence is circumstantial, but the pattern is undeniable. And this being, Ash Lucar, Stephen said, his eyes turning to the silent, powerful figure standing behind Cynthia's chair. It had not spoken, its presence alone a source of tension and awe in the room. You claim it is the merged form of the boy, Ash Ketchum, and his Pokemon? It is, Cynthia affirmed, and it is our single greatest weapon against this threat. Chairman Prescott held up a hand, his expression sorrowful. This is all, deeply disturbing. A threat that feeds on negativity, a secret society. It sounds like something from a children's story. He looked at Ash Lucar. And this being's power, it is frightening. How can we be sure it is not the cause, as this Master Kale first believed? The debate was going exactly as Ash Lucar had predicted. They were politicians and warriors, used to tangible threats. This was a battle of concepts, of shadows and whispers. They needed something more. And then it happened. Lance, who had been listening intently, suddenly winced. He brought a hand to his temple, his expression clouding over with confusion. What, he began, his voice trailing off. Behind him, his Dragonite, a Pokemon known for its gentle spirit and unshakable bond with its trainer, let out a low, guttural growl. Its eyes, usually soft and intelligent, flickered with a strange, hostile light. It took a half step forward, its powerful claws flexing. Dragonite, stand down, Lance commanded, but his voice lacked its usual authority. He looked at his partner, a flicker of fear, of distrust, in his own eyes. What's wrong with you? No one else seemed to notice the subtle shift, too caught up in the debate. But Ash Lucar saw it. It felt it. A thread of the same hollow, malicious energy it had felt from the amplifiers, but incredibly fine, almost undetectable, was wrapped around the bond between Lance and his Dragonite, fraying it, poisoning it. It was a targeted attack. A poison for the soul. The chairman's tea, Ash Lucar's voice shot into Cynthia's mind. The aide who poured it. His aura is hollow. Cynthia's eyes darted to Chairman Prescott, then to the young, unassuming aide who had just served a fresh round of tea to the champions. The aide was standing by the wall, his posture perfect, his expression blank. Utterly, unnaturally blank. The poison was working fast. Lance swayed on his feet, a look of profound betrayal on his face as he stared at his oldest partner. His Dragonite growled again, its confusion and the poison's influence manifesting as aggression. The security details tensed, their hands moving to their Pokeballs. The summit was about to collapse into chaos and violence, a perfect victory for the Argent Society. Enough, Ash Lucar's voice boomed, not in their minds, but aloud. The harmonious baritone cut through the tension like a sword. It moved, a blur of blue and black. Before anyone could react, it was standing in the center of the room. It slammed its palms down on the circular conference table. A wave of crimson aura, not an attack, but a field of absolute authority, erupted outwards. The doors to the chamber slammed shut and glowed with a crimson seal. The video feeds went dead. They were locked in. The summit is now under my protection, it declared, its crimson eyes sweeping over the shocked faces of the champions. And my jurisdiction. No one leaves this room. There is a traitor among us. Panic erupted. Aides shouted. Pokemon moved into defensive stances. What is the meaning of this? Prescott demanded, his gentle demeanor gone, replaced by outrage. You are holding the leaders of the world hostage. I am holding them in sanctuary, Ash Lucar corrected, its gaze unwavering. Lance is being poisoned, not with a chemical, but with an oral toxin designed to sever the bond between a trainer and their Pokemon. It was administered moments ago. Only someone in this room could be responsible. All eyes turned to Lance. He was leaning heavily on the table, his breathing shallow. His Dragonite was now in a full battle crouch, its teeth bared. The evidence was undeniable. The hunt began. It was a locked room mystery on the grandest scale. Cynthia took the lead, her voice cutting and precise, the interrogator in a room full of the most powerful suspects imaginable. Ash Lucar stood in the center, a silent, omniscient judge, feeling the oral ripples as each person reacted. The poison was delivered via the tea, Cynthia stated, her eyes scanning each person. The server was an aide. Let's start with them. One by one, the aides were questioned. They were terrified, but their auras, while panicked, were clear. Ash Lucar could feel their fear, their loyalty to their champions. They were clean. It could have been a delayed release mechanism, Stephen Stone theorized, his analytical mind kicking into gear. The poison could have been introduced before the summit even began. A possibility, Cynthia agreed. Which means everyone who had access to this room is a suspect. Including the champions themselves. The accusation hung in the air, thick and poisonous. Diantha looked offended. Stephen was intrigued. Lance was too consumed by the poison's effects to react. The questioning continued. Cynthia was relentless, picking apart alibis, asking about security protocols. Ash Lucar remained silent, a living polygraph. It felt the spikes of indignation, the waves of confusion. But it did not feel the hollow signature of the traitor. It was as if they did not exist. Then it understood. It wasn't about finding a lie. The traitor wasn't lying. They believed completely in their cause. It was about finding the absence of something. The absence of a normal emotional reaction. Chairman Prescott, Cynthia said, her tone respectful but firm. You have been unusually quiet. I am an old man, my dear, Prescott said with a sad smile. I am simply overwhelmed by the horror of this situation. To think that one of us, one of my own people. His aura was a placid sea of gentle sadness and grandfatherly concern. It was perfect, too perfect. A real person, even a calm one, would have ripples of anger, of fear, of uncertainty. Prescott's aura was a flawless, artificial mask. The mask is the clue, Ash Lucar sent to Cynthia. Press him. Not about the poison. About his ideology. Cynthia understood. She shifted her line of questioning. Chairman, you've dedicated your life to the League, to maintaining peace and order between the regions. It must be frustrating. The constant squabbling, the rivalries, the rogue organizations like Team Rocket or Team Galactic, springing up time and again. Prescott's expression softened further. It has been a heavy burden. So much chaos, so much needless conflict. I have often wished for a simpler world. A more orderly one. A world of perfect, silent order. Cynthia asked, her voice dropping, using the very words Sir Aaron had spoken of. Where there is no conflict because there is no free will to cause it. For the first time, a flicker of something appeared in Prescott's aura. It wasn't anger. It was resonance. A flicker of validation. He had been seen. A world of purpose, Prescott corrected her softly. A world united under a single, benevolent, guiding consciousness. Free from the pain of choice, of failure. Malachor does not seek to destroy the world. It seeks to perfect it. To save us from ourselves. The confession was so quiet, so utterly convinced of its own righteousness, that it was more chilling than any villainous rant. The mask had not just dropped, it had dissolved. Beneath it was not a monster, but a true believer. It was you, Lance rasped, pushing himself up, his bond with Dragonite now frayed to a thread. All these years, you've been helping them. Prescott sighed, a genuine sadness in his eyes. I help the future, champion. You are all relics of the past, clinging to your chaotic, painful freedom. He looked at Ash Lucar. Especially you. You are the ultimate expression of chaotic individualism. A being that should not exist. You are the antithesis of the beautiful, silent order that is to come. He tapped a sequence on the underside of the conference table. Before anyone could move, a section of the floor beneath him opened up, and he dropped through, a hidden escape route. At the same instant, his aide, the one with the hollow aura, moved. He was not a politician's assistant. He was a highly trained operative. He threw 3 smoke pellets that filled the room with a thick, disorienting gas. He lunged, not at a champion, but at the evidence, the case containing the Argent Society servers. But he never reached it. A blur of blue moved through the smoke. There was a single, sharp impact. The aide dropped, unconscious. Ash Lucar stood over him, its hand still extended from the precise nerve strike it had delivered. The escape hatch was sealed, but Prescott was gone. The immediate threat was over, but the conspiracy was now laid bare. The traitor had escaped, but the other champions were now fully, terrifyingly aware of the truth. Ash Lucar walked to Lance. It placed a hand on his shoulder, and another on Dragonite's snout. A wave of pure, crimson aura flowed through them both, a healing balm for the soul. The fine, poisonous threads of hollow energy dissolved. The hostility faded from Dragonite's eyes, replaced by worry for its trainer. Lance gasped, the color returning to his face, the bond snapping back into place, strong and clear. "Thank you," Lance breathed, his voice filled with a newfound, absolute respect. The room was silent, save for the hum of the emergency lights. They had failed to capture the traitor, but they had succeeded in their primary mission. The leaders of the world were no longer skeptical. They were believers. "He called himself a relic of the past," Stephen Stone said, breaking the silence, his voice cold as steel. "I believe it is time we showed the future, the power of history." He looked at Lance, at Diantha, and finally at Cynthia and Ash Lucar. "The Argent Society has declared war on us all. I propose we give them one." A global alliance was formed, not with a treaty or a handshake, but with a shared, silent nod in a locked, smoke-filled room. The battle was no longer just Ash Lucar and Cynthia's. It was the world's. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Divine Weapon. The Indigo Plateau Conference Room, a place of historic accords, had become a war room. The air was thick with tension and the low hum of advanced scanning equipment. For 3 days, the greatest strategic minds of the Pokémon League had been locked in a digital and psychic arms race against the ghost in their own machine. Stephen Stone's technical teams from the Devon Corporation worked in shifts, trying to crack the Argent Society's encrypted servers, while Lance's G-men pursued every lead on the vanished Chairman Prescott. But their enemy was a phantom, always one step ahead. It was Ash Lucar that found the thread. It sat in the center of the room, motionless, its consciousness immersed in the data streams flowing through the captured servers. It wasn't reading the code. It was feeling the intent behind it, the cold, hollow signature of the Society's architects. It was sifting through terabytes of benign data, shipping manifests, geological surveys, archival requests, searching for a single, discordant note. Here, its voice projected, cutting through the low murmur of the room. Heads snapped in its direction. On the main holographic display, a single file was highlighted, an archaeological requisition for deep-level access to the Mount Coronet Library, filed 6 months prior by Prescott himself. It was a request for textual analysis of the original engravings on the spear pillar, specifically those pertaining to the adamant orb. "The adamant orb," Lance said, his brow furrowed. "It's a historical artifact, a focusing lens for Dialga's power. It's kept in a sealed vault in Celestic Town." "It's more than that," Cynthia countered, her eyes alight with dawning horror as she cross-referenced the file with ancient texts on her own slate. "The orb doesn't just amplify Dialga's power. It resonates with it, shares a fundamental connection to it. To control the orb is to have a direct line to Dialga itself." "They are not trying to control Dialga," Ash Lucar clarified, its projection grim. The full shape of the plan coalesced in its mind, a vision of absolute sacrilege. "They are going to corrupt it. They will use the orb as a conduit, a syringe to inject Malicor's influence directly into the Lord of Time. They will turn a god into their divine weapon." A chilling silence fell over the war room. The scale of the enemy's ambition was beyond anything they had imagined. "Where is the orb now?" Stephen asked, his voice sharp. Cynthia's fingers flew across her slate. She brought up a live feed from the Celestic Town Historical Center. The screen showed the vault. Its foot-thick steel door was torn from its hinges, the room beyond ransacked. "They already have it. And they are taking it back to the only place a ritual of that magnitude could work," Ash Lucar concluded, rising to its full height, its form radiating a controlled, deadly energy. "They are going back to Spear Pillar." There was no more debate. The Alliance mobilized. Within minutes, the champions were airborne, a small, elite strike force against a world-ending threat. Dragonite, Metagross, and Garchomp streaked through the sky, a vanguard of immense power. Ash Lucar flew alongside them, not with wings, but by generating solid platforms of crimson aura beneath its feet, pushing off them in great, soaring leaps that matched the pace of their Pokémon. It was a technique from Aaron's memory, a way to turn the sky itself into solid ground. As they neared the snow-capped peak of Mount Coronet, the world seemed to hold its breath. The air grew cold, charged with a malevolent energy that was a foul echo of the rift it had sealed weeks ago. The Argent Society was waiting for them. The resistance they met on the mountain slopes was not a ragtag group of cultists. It was a disciplined, well-equipped fighting force. Elite society operatives, hidden in camouflaged positions, commanded teams of powerful Pokémon. A volley of hyper beams from a dozen Tyranitar erupted from a ridge, not aimed at them, but at the cliffs above, triggering a colossal avalanche of rock and ice meant to bury them. Lance's Dragonite met the avalanche head-on, a hurricane of orange scales and righteous fury, its own hyper beam carving a path through the falling debris. Steven's Metagross became a living shield, its psychic power deflecting the largest of the boulders. The battle had begun before they even reached the summit. They pushed through the blizzard created by a legion of Abomasnow, shattered the defensive lines of ruthless Scizor and Bisharp, their every step contested. It was clear the society was not just a group of ideologues, they had resources and military discipline that rivaled a small army. They broke through the final line of defense and emerged onto the plateau of Spear Pillar. The sight that greeted them was a nightmare. The sacred ground, where Ash Lucario had been born, was now a massive ritual site. The remaining pillars were draped in black cloth, etched with the same pulsating purple runes that had defiled the Aura shrines. In the center, on the dais where the fabric of reality had once torn open, stood Chairman Prescott. He was not overseeing the ritual, he was the ritual. He held the adamant orb aloft. It was no longer a gleaming diamond but a vortex of screaming purple energy, a miniature black hole of corrupted time. Veins of the same foul energy crawled up Prescott's arms, consuming him, turning him into a living conduit. Surrounding him were dozens of society elites, a veritable army of powerful trainers. And at their forefront stood Niall, a malicious grin plastered on his face as he surveyed the arriving champions. "The relics have arrived," he called out, his voice dripping with theatrical mockery. "Just in time to witness the dawn of the new, perfectly ordered world. A world ruled by a silent, benevolent God. Your God is a parasite, Niall," Lance roared, as he and his Dragonite landed, shaking the very stones. "And this is its last meal." The battle for Spear Pillar erupted, a clash of titans at the summit of the world. It was a maelstrom of elemental fury. Lance's Dragonite and Steven's Metagross, a duo of overwhelming power and tactical genius, engaged the bulk of the society's forces. Diantha's Gardevoir moved like a phantom, its psychic blasts disabling key targets, protecting their flanks. Ash Lucario was a crimson whirlwind, its objective clear: break the line and stop the ritual. It moved through the battlefield with a purpose that was terrifying, disabling opponents not with brute force, but with precise, debilitating aura strikes learned from Aaron's crystal. Cynthia and her Garchomp fought at its side, a perfect synthesis of grace and ferocity. Garchomp was a blur of teeth and claws, its dragon rush tearing a hole in the society's formation. They were breaking through, pushing toward the center, toward Prescott and the pulsating, screaming orb. They could feel the temporal distortion in the air, time itself beginning to warp and stutter around the ritual site. They were so close. Niall, seeing their advance, didn't move to intercept them himself. His smile only widened. Predictable, he sneered, and snapped his fingers. It was a trap. From the shadows of a shattered pillar where it had lain in perfect camouflage, a colossal Metagross rose. But it was wrong. Its silver armor was scarred with purple, pulsating veins, and its red eye was a vortex of cold, calculating malice. It was another corrupted beast, held in reserve for this exact moment. It ambushed them, not with a psychic blast, but with a meteor mash infused with Malicor's dark energy. It was an attack meant not to disable, but to annihilate. It moved with impossible speed, aimed directly at Cynthia. Garchomp saw it. In that split second, with no time for a command, it acted on pure, unwavering loyalty. It threw itself in front of its trainer, taking the full, catastrophic impact of the attack against its flank. The sound was sickening, a crack of breaking bone and tearing flesh. The dark energy exploded on impact, and Garchomp was thrown through the air like a ragdoll, slamming into the base of a pillar before crumpling to the ground. It didn't cry out. It was a silent, devastating collapse. The world, for Cynthia, narrowed to that single, horrific image. The roar of the battle faded. The temporal distortions, the fate of the world, it all vanished. There was only her partner, her friend of over a decade, lying broken and still on the cold stone. A gaping, ugly wound festered on its side, black energy actively eating away at its flesh, a poison of the soul. Garchomp. Her scream was raw, stripped of all her usual composure. She was frozen, her mind unable to process the sheer shock of the moment. The corrupted Metagross raised its claws for the final, killing blow. But the blow never landed. A dome of solid, crimson aura erupted around Cynthia and her fallen partner, the Metagross's attack glancing off it with a deafening clang. Ash Lucario was there, appearing in an instant, its back to the enemy, its entire focus on the scene within its protective shield. It knelt beside Garchomp, the battle outside forgotten. He is not gone, it projected, its voice a lifeline of calm in her storm of panic. But the corruption is killing him from within. I can fight it, but I need you. Your bond is the anchor. Hold on to him, Cynthia. Do not let him go. Cynthia fell to her knees, her hands gently touching Garchomp's bloodied hide. Tears streamed freely down her face, a rare and startling sight. Ash Lucario placed its palms over the horrific wound. It didn't recoil from the vile energy. It met it. A torrent of pure, crimson aura poured from its hands into Garchomp's body. It was not a gentle healing light. It was a cleansing fire, a declaration of war on the cellular level. Garchomp's body convulsed as the two antithetical energies tore at each other within him. It was an agony beyond comprehension. Ash Lucario's own form trembled, the strain of channeling so much purifying energy while simultaneously holding the psychic poison at bay immense. Stay with me, Garchomp, Cynthia whispered, her voice choked with emotion. She pressed her forehead against her Pokemon's, pouring all her love, all her strength, all her shared memories down the bond that connected them. Her strength became Ash Lucario's strength. It felt her unwavering bond and used it as a guide, a map through Garchomp's life force, allowing it to target the corruption with pinpoint precision without harming the healthy tissue. The process was agonizingly slow. Outside the dome, the sounds of the raging battle were a distant storm. In here, there was only the quiet, desperate fight for a single life. Slowly, miraculously, the tide turned. The black, necrotic energy began to recede from the wound, sizzled and burned away by the crimson fire. The gaping wound began to knit itself together, flesh and scale reforming under the power of the aura. Finally, with a last, shuddering gasp, Garchomp's eyes fluttered open. The vacant, pained look was gone, replaced by its familiar, fierce intelligence. The wound was gone, leaving only a faint, shimmering scar. He was weak, exhausted, but he was alive. Cynthia let out a sob of pure, unadulterated relief. She looked at Ash Lucario, its form slumped with exhaustion, the crimson light of its aura dimmed. She didn't have the words. She simply reached out and placed her hand on its shoulder, her touch conveying a depth of gratitude and a new, profound connection that transcended words. A partnership forged in crisis had been tempered in shared vulnerability into something unbreakable. A shadow fell over their dome. How touching, a voice, cold and sharp as obsidian, cut through their moment. Wasting your energy on a single, sentimental attachment while the world is being reborn. Ash Lucario rose, leaving Cynthia to tend to her weakened partner. It turned, its exhaustion vanishing, replaced by a cold, hard fury. Standing outside the now fading shield was a woman clad in the stark black and silver uniform of an Argent Society commander. Her face was severe, framed by short cropped black hair, and her eyes held the fanatic gleam of a true believer. She stood atop a colossal Zapdos, but like the Metagross, it was corrupted. Black lightning, devoid of light, crackled between its wings, and its cry was a jagged shriek of pure rage. My name is Lyra, the woman announced. And I am here to remove the primary obstacle to progress. The corrupted Zapdos unleashed a bolt of its black lightning. Ash Lucario didn't dodge. It created a flat, spinning disk of crimson aura in front of it, catching the bolt, absorbing its chaotic energy, and harmlessly dispersing it. It was another of Aaron's techniques. Your master offers silence and slavery, Ash Lucar's voice boomed across the pillar. We offer the right to choose. The right to feel. The right to have attachments worth fighting for. The battle was joined. It was an aerial duel of breathtaking speed and power. Lyra's Zapdos was a storm of dark energy, its black lightning tearing chunks from the ancient pillars. But Ash Lucar was its equal. It leapt through the air, creating its aura platforms, its movements a seamless, flowing dance. It didn't just fight. It dictated the terms of the engagement, using Aaron's knowledge to weave threads of energy, redirecting the dark lightning back at its source, forcing Lyra and her mount constantly on the defensive. It was a battle of ideologies made manifest. Lyra's rigid, powerful, but ultimately straightforward attacks against Ash Lucar's fluid, adaptive, and brilliantly creative style. Finally, seeing an opening, Ash Lucar formed a spear of pure, solidified aura in its hand and hurled it. It didn't strike the Zapdos, but the air just in front of it, exploding into a net of binding energy that ensnared the corrupted legendary. As the Pokémon struggled, Ash Lucar appeared above it. It didn't deliver a final blow. It did as it had for Registeel, for Garchomp. It placed its hands on the struggling Zapdos and unleashed a massive, explosive wave of purifying light. The shriek of the Zapdos turned from one of rage to one of agony, and then, finally, to one of release. The black lightning vanished, replaced by a brilliant, healthy yellow. The corruption was burned away. The legendary bird, freed from its prison, let out a triumphant cry and fled the battle, its loyalty no longer bound to the society. Lyra fell, landing hard on the stone. Lance's Dragonite was there in an instant, a single claw pinning her to the ground. You fight for a world of pain and chaos. She screamed at Ash Lucar, her face contorted with the rage of the truly devout. Team Rocket, Galactic, Plasma, again and again, humanity proves it is too fractured, too selfish. We offer peace. A final, perfect peace. You can't see the beauty in its silence. Her words were left hanging in the air as Lance's men took her into custody. With their commander defeated and the tide of the main battle turned, the Society's forces broke, their morale shattered. But they had bought their master enough time. Prescott, now little more than a desiccated husk animated by Malacor's energy, let out a final, triumphant laugh. He plunged the now black adamant orb into the dais. It is done. The gateway is open. Drink, master. Drink of time itself. The orb didn't summon Dialga. It did something worse. It punched a hole in the timeline. A massive, swirling vortex of raw temporal energy erupted from the ground, the roar of Dialga echoing from its depths, a sound of pure agony. Time warped around them. Pillars aged 1,000 years in a second, crumbling to dust, then reversed, becoming pristine again. Prescott himself was consumed, his body disintegrating into the vortex, his sacrifice complete. Steven and Lance, seeing the danger, focused all their power on the dais, shattering the corrupted orb. The vortex, its anchor destroyed, began to collapse. But the damage was done. From the sky, from the very fabric of reality, a presence was felt. A vast, silent, hungry consciousness. Malachor. It did not manifest, but they all felt its satisfaction as it drank in the torrent of temporal energy flooding from the collapsing rift. It was like a starving man feasting. The psychic pressure was immense, a promise of the power it was accumulating. Then, the rift snapped shut. Spear Pillar was silent, a wrecked ruin under a calm sky. The Argent Society was defeated, their plan to enslave a god thwarted. But as the champions gathered, tending to their wounded, a terrifying understanding dawned on them all. They had won the battle. They had saved Dialga, but in doing so, they had just served their enemy a divine meal. Malachor was stronger now, gorged on the very power of time. The clock was ticking, and they all knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that the hour of the god's arrival was now terrifyingly close. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Rift Between Guardians. The victory at Spear Pillar felt disturbingly hollow. They had stopped the Argent Society and saved Dialga, but the psychic backlash of Malacor's feast on temporal energy had been felt by every aura-sensitive being on the planet. It was a declaration of power, a promise of what was to come. For the champions, now fully united with Cynthia, it was a call to arms. For Kale, it was something else entirely. From the austere meditation chamber of the Rhoda Sanctuary, where he had been released into the Guardians, custody pending a formal league inquiry, he had felt the cataclysm. He did not feel a victory. He felt a colossal destabilization, a violent spasm in the world's life force. He saw the near corruption of a literal god of time not as a plan they had thwarted, but as proof of the conflict's terrifying escalation. In his mind, the logic was simple, terrifying, and absolute. These grand-scale threats had only begun to manifest after the creation of the unnatural, world-alteringly powerful being that was Ash Lucar. It was a lightning rod, and it was drawing a storm that would shatter the world. His fear, tempered by centuries of rigid tradition, crystallized into a new, dangerous resolve. The champions were fools, rallying behind the very catalyst of their destruction. The only way to save the world was to remove the catalyst. He could not attack Ash Lucar directly, its alliance with the League made it politically untouchable. But he could strip it of its legitimacy, of its very identity as a guardian. He invoked the Senator, the right of truth, an ancient, binding form of duel for leadership of the entire Aura Guardian Order. It was not a battle for control, but for ideology. The winner's philosophy, their very way of being, would be declared the true path. It was a challenge Ash Lucar, as a being claiming the legacy of the Guardians, could not refuse without forfeiting all claim to their heritage. The summons was sent, a formal, unyielding projection that reverberated across the global oral network. "It's a trap," Cynthia said, her voice tight. They stood in the training grounds of the Indigo Plateau, a wide, grassy field where Ash Lucar had been attempting to teach a group of Lance's elite trainers the basics of sensing aura. "He knows he can't beat you in a raw power contest. This is a political battle disguised as a duel. He wants to defeat you with technique, with discipline, to prove to the other Guardians that your way is chaotic and wrong." "He is not wrong to be afraid," Ash Lucar projected, its crimson eyes watching the struggling trainers try to sense the life in the grass beneath their feet. "His mistake is in where he directs that fear. He is fighting the symptom because the disease is too vast for his tradition to comprehend." It turned its gaze to Cynthia. "But I must accept. To refuse is to tell every Guardian that I believe their ways are worthless. It would validate Kale's claim that I am an outsider, a monster. To unite them, I must first prove that I understand them. Even him." And so, they returned to Rhoda. The atmosphere this time was even more fraught with tension. The Guardians were divided. A younger faction, who had witnessed Ash Lucar's leadership during the siege, watched its arrival with a furtive, hopeful respect. The older traditionalists, the bulk of the order, stood with Kale, their faces grim masks of disapproval. The dueling arena was the sanctuary's foundation, a massive, circular stone platform suspended over a bottomless chasm, open to the sky. Kale stood waiting in the center. He had shed his master's robes for the simple, practical garb of a warrior. At his side, resting on the stone, was a single, perfectly straight bow staff. He radiated a calm so absolute it was unnerving, the placid surface of a deeply frozen lake. Ash Lucar stepped onto the platform. Cynthia stood at the edge, a silent observer and advocate, her presence a clear statement that the world's most powerful champion stood with the accused. "The terms of the Senator are simple," Kale announced, his voice echoing in the vast space. "There's one rule. You may only use aura. No physical strikes, no Pokemon. This is a battle of will, of discipline, of truth. The first to be forced from the platform, or to concede, loses. The loser will submit to the victor's authority, utterly and without question. Do you accept?" "We accept." Ash Lucar's voice resonated, a harmony of two souls speaking as one. The duel began not with a bang, but with a breath. Kale raised his staff, and it glowed with a brilliant, sky-blue light. He didn't charge. He moved with the slow, deliberate grace of a calligrapher, tracing patterns in the air. From those patterns, needles of pure, solidified aura, no bigger than a sewing needle but humming with incredible density, shot forward. It was a test of precision. Ash Lucar didn't erect a shield. It simply moved. Its body flowed like smoke, weaving between the deadly projectiles. It was not just dodging. Its own aura was subtly repelling the needles, causing them to shift their trajectory by millimeters, enough to make them miss. It was an act of control so subtle that most of the watching Guardians didn't even see it. Kale's eyes narrowed. He shifted his attack. He stomped his staff on the ground, and a perfect, geometric wall of interlocking hexagonal shields erupted in front of him. From behind this flawless defense, he launched a barrage of larger, faster aura spheres. It was the textbook Guardian offense-defense posture. Ash Lucario did not try to break the shield. It met the aura spheres with its open palms. As each sphere hit, it didn't explode. It was caught, its energy absorbed into Ash Lucario's own. In a matter of seconds, it had absorbed a dozen of Kale's attacks, its own form beginning to glow with a brilliant, pulsating crimson light, supercharged with borrowed energy. Kale's perfect technique was being used as fuel against him. With a fluid, spinning motion, Ash Lucario released the energy. Not back at Kale's shield, but into the stone platform beneath their feet. A web of crimson energy spread across the floor. The ancient stone groaned, and a section of the platform directly under Kale's shield tilted violently, like a trapdoor. Kale's perfect, static defense was ruined by the unstable ground, forcing him to leap back, abandoning his fortress. The younger Guardians murmured in awe. He was not just fighting Kale, he was fighting the entire arena. "Your power is great, abomination," Kale grunted, his calm finally cracking. "But it is messy, unfocused. The power of a flood, not a river. It is chaos." He changed tactics again, showcasing the true depth of his mastery. He abandoned projectiles and began to weave his aura into complex constructs. A gleaming blue spear appeared in his hand. He lunged, his movements a blur of speed and precision honed over a century of practice. The spear was not just a weapon. It shifted, its tip morphing into a hook, a blade, a bludgeon, its form changing with his every thought. Ash Lucario met the assault. It created no weapon of its own. It used its body, its hands becoming shields, its shins deflecting the spear's shaft. But it was being pushed back. Kale's technique was flawless, his relentless, shifting attack leaving no room for counters. He was forcing Ash Lucario toward the edge of the chasm. This was the core of Kale's argument made manifest. Pure, disciplined technique against raw, shapeless power. And technique was winning. Seeing his advantage, Kale pressed harder. The spear dissolved and his aura reformed into two massive, gauntlet-like hands that slammed down, intending to crush Ash Lucario or drive it from the platform. The watching traditionalists nodded. This was how it should be. The victory of order over chaos. But as the aural fists came crashing down, Ash Lucario stopped retreating. It stood its ground, its feet planted. And it did something that defied every law of aura combat they had ever known. It reached out, not to block the attack, but to touch it. It laid its palms gently on the two descending fists of pure energy. And it did not push back. It listened. It felt the structure of Kale's construct. The rigid lines of force, the contained, compressed energy. It felt the single, central flaw in Kale's entire philosophy. It was all external. It was all about projecting power, about imposing will upon the world. It had no connection to the world. With a quiet breath, Ash Lucario didn't counter the attack. It resolved it. It found the single, keystone frequency holding the construct together and introduced a dissonant note, a gentle pulse of its own aura. The two massive, destructive fists of blue energy did not explode. They simply unraveled. They dissolved into a harmless cloud of glittering blue dust that washed over the arena. Kale froze, his arms outstretched, his ultimate attack having vanished into thin air. He stared in utter disbelief. Such a thing should be impossible. "Your technique is perfect, Kale," Ash Lucario's voice resonated in the stunned silence. It took a step forward, its posture no longer defensive. "You have spent a lifetime building the most flawless, the most beautiful, the most empty cage. You have mastered control over your own aura. But you have forgotten to listen to the aura of everything else." It walked to a small, potted sapling that sat at the edge of the dueling platform for decoration, a symbol of life in the sterile environment. The plant was slightly withered, its leaves brown at the edges from the ambient, combative energy of the duel. Ash Lucario gently touched one of its leaves. A soft, warm, crimson light flowed from its fingertips. It was not a grand display of power. It was a gentle, nurturing pulse. The brown edges of the leaf receded. The stem straightened. A new, vibrant green flowed back into the plant. It had not just healed it, it had encouraged it to live. It was an act of pure creation. "Your aura is a weapon," Ash Lucario said, turning back to the stunned Kale. And that is all it will ever be. You can shatter mountains with it, but you cannot do that. You have forgotten that the ultimate expression of power is not to destroy. It is to create. That was the final blow. It was not a punch, not an aura sphere. It was an ideological checkmate. It was a truth so profound and self-evident that it shattered the foundations of Kale's entire existence. He looked at his own hands, hands that could shape aura into 1,000 deadly forms, and for the first time, he saw them as limited. Useless for the most important tasks. His shoulders slumped. The fierce, zealous light in his eyes died, replaced by a vast, empty sea of doubt. He had lost. But before he could concede, before the duel could officially end, a dozen alarms shrieked at once from the main sanctuary. A red alert klaxon blared across the mountain, and a young guardian ran onto the edge of the platform, his face pale with panic. Master Kale, all of them, the sanctuaries in Hoenn, in Johto, the seal at the Lake of the Sun, they are all under attack, simultaneously. The duel was instantly forgotten. A holographic map of the world appeared over the arena. Half a dozen key oral nexuses, the locations of the ancient seals that held Malachor bound, were flashing with crimson alerts. This was not a random assault. It was a coordinated, strategic decapitation strike. Niall, Cynthia breathed, her hand flying to the comms unit on her wrist. He saw the division. He saw our focus was here. They are not trying to break the seals, Ash Lucar said, its tactical mind analyzing the attack patterns. Not yet. The attacks are too weak. This is a probe. They are weakening them, measuring their defenses, preparing for a final, singular push on the primary seal. Rhoda, Kale whispered, his face ashen. The main seal, the linchpin of the entire prison, was right here, in the heart of their own sanctuary. Ash Lucar turned to him, its victory in the duel now an irrelevant footnote. It was the de facto leader, and its first command was not one of triumph, but of unity. Kale, your traditionalists know the defensive wards of this mountain better than anyone. My loyalists know how to fight this corrupted energy. We need both. Get your people to the primary seal chamber. Reinforce the outer wards. Do not try to fight the enemy directly, your aura will only feed them. Your job is to hold the line. Kale stared, shocked by the sudden, unquestioned authority in its voice. It wasn't asking, it was commanding, and the command was strategically flawless. He looked at the flashing red lights, at the faces of his terrified people, and then back at the being he had tried so hard to destroy. In that moment, his pride died, replaced by a grim, desperate sense of duty. He gave a single, sharp nod. It will be done. He turned and sprinted from the platform, his voice already barking orders, his personal defeat forgotten in the face of his people's potential extinction. Ash Lucar turned to the younger guardians who had supported it. With me, we are the sword, Kale is the shield, we will meet the enemy before they reach the heart of the mountain. To Cynthia, it sent a single, urgent thought. Cynthia, the champions, we cannot hold them on every front. Tell Lance and the others which seals are most vulnerable. We will hold the center. They must protect the flanks. Cynthia was already relaying the information, coordinating a global defense from the edge of a dueling platform. The battle for Rhoda began. Niall's forces, led by his most elite corrupted trainers, poured into the mountain's outer halls. But they were met not by a divided order, but a united one. Kale's traditionalists formed walls of intricate, defensive energy, slowing the invaders, funneling them into kill zones. They absorbed the brunt of the attack, their ancient techniques, while useless offensively, proving to be magnificent for defense. And into those kill zones came the sword. Ash Lucar and its small team of younger, more adaptable guardians struck like lightning. They did not use aura spheres. They used the techniques Ash Lucar had shown them, kinetic pulses, aural blades that severed the corruption's hold, and purifying light. They fought back to back, a seamless fusion of ancient defense and modern, adaptive offense. At the heart of the battle was Ash Lucar, a crimson storm of righteous fury. It moved through the invaders, its every action a lesson in the philosophy it had just espoused. It disabled the corrupted Pokémon not by destroying them, but by severing the puppet strings of their masters, cleansing them where it could. It shattered the resolve of the society operatives not with fear, but with the sheer, indomitable force of its will. Kale, holding the final defensive line before the seal chamber, watched as Ash Lucar fought. He saw the power, the grace, the brilliant strategic mind, and the profound compassion it showed to the very creatures it was forced to strike down. He finally understood. This being was not a flood. It was the entire ocean, capable of the gentle tide that nurtures life and the terrifying tsunami that scours the unworthy from the shore. They repelled the attack. The last of Niall's forces retreated, leaving the outer halls of Rhoda scarred but secure. Reports flooded in from Cynthia. The champions, guided by their intelligence, had successfully defended the other seals. The global assault had been thwarted. A weary, battered, but united force of Aura Guardians gathered in the main hall. Kale, his face streaked with grime, his robes torn, walked through the crowd and stopped before Lucario. In front of his entire order, the old traditionalist bowed low, a gesture of absolute submission and respect. "I was wrong," he said, his voice raw. "My pride nearly destroyed us. The right of truth is complete. I recognize you as the true leader of our order. Command us." Lucario looked out at the faces of the Guardians, new and old, their enmities washed away by the fire of battle. They were finally won, but the victory was a grim one. "They failed," it said, its voice echoing in the hall. "But they learned what they needed to know. They have the measure of our defenses. They know the seals are weakened." It walked to the holographic map, which now showed the primary seal at Rhoda, a brilliant blue sphere that now had a spiderweb of fine, purple cracks running across its surface. They will no longer divide their forces. They will throw everything they have, all of Malakor's growing power, at this single point. The final battle is no longer a distant threat. It is at our door. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The God's Arrival. The Great Seal of Rhoda was not made of stone or metal, but of pure, solidified will. For 1,000 years, it had been a perfect, silent sphere of blue light in the heart of the mountain, the linchpin of a global prison. Now, it was dying. Spiderwebs of violent purple energy crawled across its surface, each one a crack in the ancient consensus. Kale, his face grim and etched with exhaustion, stood with 24 of his best traditionalists, pouring every ounce of their disciplined aura into the failing ward. The blue light would swell, pushing the cracks back, only for them to reappear moments later, deeper and more numerous. It was like trying to patch a shattering dam with their bare hands. Lucario stood behind them, not participating in the futile effort. Its senses were extended, feeling the vibrations of the entire planet. It felt the other seals, the ones the champions had just saved, humming with a strained but steady light. And it felt this one, the heart of the system, preparing to break. "It is no use," its voice resonated through the chamber, a calm, grim finality that cut through the Guardians' desperate chants. "You are trying to hold back the tide. The tide has already turned. We will not abandon our post." Kale retorted, his voice strained, sweat pouring down his face. "It is our sacred duty to maintain the seal. Your duty is to protect the world, not the vessel that contains its doom," Lucario countered, its tone sharp, commanding. It was no longer offering a new philosophy, it was issuing orders as a commander on the eve of battle. "The seal will break. That is a certainty. What happens next is a choice. We can be here, crushed when the dam bursts, or we can be on high ground, ready for the flood." It turned to Cynthia, who stood at the ready, a comms unit in her hand, the direct link to the global alliance. "Tell them, it's time. All forces to Rhoda, now." Kale's concentration finally broke. He looked from the cracking seal to Lucario's unwavering, resolute form. He saw not a defeatist, but a strategist repositioning his pieces for a different, greater battle. He had spent his life protecting a cage. Lucario was preparing to fight the monster. With a final, heavy sigh, Kale lowered his hands. "Guardians, you heard him. Fall back. Form defensive positions at the main gate. The sanctuary is no longer a prison. It is a fortress." The moment their combined energy withdrew from the seal, it gave way. There was no grand explosion. There was only a silent, sickening pop, like a soap bubble bursting in a vacuum. A wave of pure, negative energy, cold and utterly devoid of life, washed out of the chamber, through the mountain, and across the face of the planet. Every living thing felt it. Plants wilted, Pokémon cowered, humans felt a sudden, inexplicable chill, a fleeting touch of absolute despair. The world held its breath, waiting for the monster to appear, for the sky to tear open. Nothing happened. The air in the chamber was still. The broken seal was just an empty space. But then, reality began to shimmer. The hard rock walls of the chamber wavered, becoming translucent. Through them, they could see not the rest of the sanctuary, but a different place. A world of impossible physics, of floating islands of rock, of waterfalls flowing sideways, all under a sky of swirling, chaotic colors. The distortion world. It is not breaking into our world, Lucario projected, its crimson eyes wide with the terrifying realization. It is pulling our world into its own. It's not an invasion, it's a merger. The shimmering intensified. The two dimensions began to bleed into one another. Outside the sanctuary, the snowy peak of the mountain flickered, momentarily replaced by a floating shard of obsidian from the other realm. This was Malicor's endgame. Not to conquer the world, but to override it, to remake it in its own image of silent, empty order. Just as the merger began to accelerate, a dozen points of light appeared in the chamber. The champions had arrived. Lance and his Dragonite, Stephen and his Metagross, Diantha and her Gardevoir. They materialized in flashes of light, a rapid response team of demigods. The reports are coming in from all over the world, Lance said, his voice grim, wasting no time on pleasantries. Spatial distortions, gravitational anomalies. It's happening everywhere. It's anchored here, Lucario stated, pointing to the empty space where the seal had been. This is the epicenter, the wound through which our realities are being stitched together. We can't fight this on 1,000 fronts. We have to cut the thread at the needle. We go in. Cynthia finished its thought, her expression a mask of cold resolve. We take the fight to the distortion world. It was a plan of breathtaking audacity. To willingly enter the hostile, alien dimension that was now the very heart of their enemy's power. But it was the only way. Giratina will not welcome an intrusion, Stephen noted, his analytical mind already calculating the variables. Its realm is being invaded, but it is notoriously territorial. Then we will make it an ally, Lucario declared. It strode to the shimmering veil between worlds. It did not tear it open. It reached out, its aura a key, and found the frequency of the barrier, the seam between dimensions. It did not force it. It persuaded it. With a soft hum, a stable, swirling gateway, a vortex of crimson and gray, opened before them. The alliance is here. Our war begins now. There was no hesitation. They were the shield of the world, and they would not break. Led by Lucario, the champions and their Pokémon charged through the gateway. Behind them came the newly united Aura Guardians, Kale at their head, his face set with a grim new purpose. They were no longer jailers. They were soldiers. The world on the other side was chaos incarnate. The very ground, if it could be called that, was a floating archipelago of rock shards drifting in a void. Gravity was a suggestion, not a law, and the enemy was waiting. From the swirling chaos below, a horde arose. Tens of thousands of them. Corrupted Pokémon, their forms twisted, their eyes glowing with malevolent purple light. Remnants of the Argent Society, their bodies now little more than vessels for Malicor's will. And new things, horrifying constructs of solidified shadow and despair that moved with a jerky, unnatural hunger. Guardians. The Aegis formation. Kale's voice roared, his lifetime of tactical discipline finding its true purpose. The Aura Guardians moved as one, creating a massive, interlocking dome of defensive energy, a beachhead of order in the chaos. Champions. On me, Lance bellowed, and the offensive began. It was a battle worthy of the myths. Lance and his Dragonite were a storm of orange fury, their combined hyper beams carving fiery paths through the enemy horde. Stephen and his Metagross were the tacticians, creating barriers of psychic energy, anticipating enemy movements, and shattering their formations with perfectly placed meteor mashes. Diantha and her Gardevoir were a graceful, deadly dance, a whirlwind of moonblasts and psychic energy that disabled dozens of foes with every attack. This was the full power of the world's greatest trainers, unleashed. But the enemy was a tide, endless and overwhelming. For every 10 corrupted Pokémon they struck down, 100 more swarmed up from the depths. Cynthia and Lucario fought at the heart of the battle, a nexus of crimson and gold. Garchomp, fully healed and burning with a vengeful fury, was a land shark in a sea of monsters. Lucario was something else entirely. It moved with a preternatural grace, its every action a perfect economy of motion. It wasn't just fighting. It was liberating. A precise chop to the neck of a corrupted Machamp, not to injure, but to sever the link to Malachor, causing the Pokémon to collapse, confused but free. A gentle touch to a raging Gyarados, a wave of purifying light that burned the corruption from its soul. It was a warrior and a healer in one, a force that defied the simple logic of the battlefield. As they fought, they pushed deeper into the distorted realm, toward a massive, floating continent of black crystal that pulsed with a dark light. It was the anchor point, the needle stitching the worlds together. "That's our target," Cynthia yelled over the roar of the battle. "If we can destroy that, we can stop the merger." She broke from the main group, her team, Garchomp, Melodic, a graceful Roserade, moving with her, a fast, deadly strike force. They carved a path toward the crystal continent. But it was a feint. The enemy had anticipated their objective. As Cynthia's team landed on the black crystal, the horde behind them parted. From the shadows emerged three figures, Malachor's royal guard. A Raikou, its fur black, its lightning a sickly purple. An Entei, its flames burning cold and dark. A Suicune, its purifying waters turned to a foul, corrosive sludge. They were legends, heroes of the world, now twisted into its most terrifying monsters. They surrounded Cynthia, cutting her off from the others. She did not flinch. Her Pokémon fought with the heart and skill that had made her a champion. But they were outmatched. A blast of black fire sent Roserade reeling. A torrent of sludge from Suicune trapped Melodic in a burning mire. Garchomp, facing the lightning-fast Raikou, was overwhelmed, a blast of dark lightning sending it crashing to the ground. Cynthia was alone, cornered, the three corrupted legends closing in for the kill. Across the battlefield, engaged with a legion of shadow constructs, Lucario felt it. It felt the spike of fear from Garchomp. It felt the surge of despair from Melodic. And through the bond that now ran deeper than any alliance, it felt the sharp, sudden terror in Cynthia's heart as she faced her own death. The tactical, logical part of its mind, the part that was Aaron's knowledge and Steven's strategy, screamed that it had to hold its position, to maintain the integrity of the main force. The twin souls of a boy from Pallet Town and his first Aura partner roared a single, deafening, defiant no. Everything stopped. The crimson aura that perpetually surrounded Lucario, a controlled, burning flame, detonated. It was a silent, world-shaking explosion of pure, untamed power. A star had been born in the heart of the distortion world. The shadow constructs around it were not just destroyed, they were vaporized, their despairing energy utterly annihilated by a force born of absolute, unconditional love and the furious, primal need to protect. Its form changed. The blue and black of its body became secondary, mere outlines containing a core of incandescent crimson light. Its eyes were no longer two distinct points, but a solid band of burning energy. It had ceased to be a physical being and had become a concept, a guardian angel forged into a divine weapon. It moved. It did not run or leap. It simply crossed the battlefield, a streak of impossible light that tore through the enemy horde, leaving a trail of purified, collapsing Pokémon in its wake. It moved with a speed that made Raikou look stationary. It arrived at the Crystal Continent in the instant between the corrupted beasts launching their final attack and that attack reaching Cynthia. The world watched in stunned awe. The Entei's black fire, the Raikou's dark lightning, the Suicune's corrosive water, all three attacks slammed into a single, outstretched hand. And they stopped. The energy was not blocked or deflected. It was, unmade. The crimson light of Lucario's being simply declared that the attack did not exist, and reality complied. It looked at the three corrupted legends, its gaze not of anger, but of pity. And then it unleashed its voice, a pure, resonant chord of aura that was not an attack, but a truth. A truth that reminded them of who they were. The thunder that brought the rain, the fire of the volcano that created new land, the north wind that brought life. The purple light in their eyes flickered, shattered by the overwhelming force of that truth. With a collective cry of agony and release, the corruption was burned from them. They were legends once more. They bowed their heads to their savior, and then vanished, returning to the world of the living. The sudden, cataclysmic release of power had an unintended side effect. It acted as a beacon, a dinner bell. A vast, ancient consciousness, the ruler of this realm, was now fully awake, and it was enraged. With a dimension-shattering roar, Giratina appeared, its colossal, draconic form unfolding from the very fabric of its world. It saw the invaders, the corruption, and the searing light of Lucario, and prepared to destroy them all. But as it focused on Lucario, another, greater presence made itself known. The black crystal continent pulsed, and from it, a being began to rise. It was colossal, its form a shifting, impossible geometry of shadow and broken light. It was less a body and more a whole in reality shaped like a god. This was Malachor. You were loud, its voice echoed, not in their ears, but in every mind in a 100-mile radius. It was a voice of cold, condescending apathy. You fight for a world of noise, of pain, of messy, pointless emotion. You struggle so hard to preserve your own suffering. Giratina, seeing the true source of its realm's corruption, forgot Lucario. It let out a roar of pure territorial fury and launched itself at Malachor. The rage of a forgotten god, Malachor's voice hummed with amusement as Giratina's attacks splashed harmlessly against its shadowy form. Another pointless noise. It swatted Giratina aside with a tendril of shadow, sending the massive legendary dragon tumbling through the void. It then turned its full attention to the crimson star that was Lucario. You, the anomaly, the twin soul, you are the loudest noise of all. It is time for you to be silenced. The final battle of the day began. It was a clash that broke the very laws of physics. Lucario, now a being of pure, incandescent energy. Cynthia, her resolve forged into a diamond edge, fighting at its side with her recovered Garchomp. And Giratina, the enraged god of its own dimension, joining the fray, recognizing that these mortals were its only hope of repelling the greater invader. They threw everything they had at the god of silence. Garchomp's Draco Meteor, Giratina's Shadow Force, Cynthia's brilliant tactical commands, and Lucario's raw, searing crimson light. Malachor met their attacks with a crushing, silent indifference. But they were no longer just attacking its body. Lucario, with its new power, could feel the core of the avatar, the nexus point where it was anchored to this reality. The heart. It roared, its true voice a blend of thunder and conviction. All of it, now. It was their final, desperate gamble. Giratina enveloped Malachor in a sphere of spectral energy. Garchomp unleashed the most powerful outrage of its life. And Lucario gathered all of its crimson, protective, furious light into a single, focused point and fired it like a star-killing lance. The beam struck the center of Malachor's shadowy mass. For the first time, the god of silence made a sound. It was a shriek of pure, psychic outrage. Not of pain, but of insult. Their combined attack had torn a wound in its perfect, silent form. A sliver of their messy, chaotic, emotional reality had been driven into its heart. It recoiled, the colossal form destabilized, the whole in reality wavering. To preserve its energy, to heal the intolerable wound, it began to withdraw. The black crystal continent shattered. The merger between worlds halted. The corrupted armies, their puppet masters' attention elsewhere, dissolved into dust. Malachor's presence vanished from the battlefield, retreating to a core deep within the most inaccessible part of the distortion world to recover. They had done it. They had won. The heroes stood on a floating rock, battered, exhausted, but alive, in a now quiet and strangely peaceful distortion world. They had faced a god and made it bleed. Giratina gave them a look of grudging, profound respect before fading back into the depths of its reclaimed realm. The crimson light around Lucario subsided, its form returning to normal, though it swayed with an exhaustion that was bone deep. Cynthia was there in an instant, her hand steadying its shoulder, her touch a silent testament to everything that had just passed between them. They had won the battle. But as they looked out into the impossible, silent void of the world around them, they knew the war was not over. The wounded god was still here, healing, waiting. And they would have to go into that final darkness to end it, once and for all. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Twin Souls' Legacy. The silence that fell in the wake of Malachor's retreat was more profound than any roar. In the alien landscape of the distortion world, the heroes stood on a floating shard of rock, a tiny island of reality in a sea of impossible geometry. The air, which moments before had crackled with the energy of gods clashing, was now still, heavy with the ozone scent of spent power. They were breathing, they were alive, and they had won. But it felt like the quiet in a trench after a bombardment, a temporary reprieve before the inevitable next assault. Giratina, the realm's resentful keeper, gave them a final, baleful glare that held a universe of grudging respect before melting back into the shadows of its home, leaving them to their own fate. The champions gathered, their Pokémon battered but standing, their faces streaked with grime and etched with a weariness that went bone deep. Lance was supporting a wounded Dragonite, Steven's Metagross was covered in psychic scorch marks. Cynthia was the first to approach Ash Lucario. He stood at the edge of the precipice, his form solid again, but the crimson light of his aura was a faint, flickering ember. The transformation, the raw output of emotional energy, had taken a tremendous toll. "You did it," she said, her voice quiet, the words inadequate for what she had witnessed. "We drove it back," he corrected, his projected thought lacking its usual resonance. "It was thin, tired. We wounded it. It has retreated to its core, to the deepest part of this dimension, where its essence is purest. It is healing, and when it returns, it will be with a focus, a fury, we will not be able to withstand a second time." The strategic reality of their situation settled over the group, a cold blanket snuffing out the brief warmth of victory. They had won the battle, but in doing so, they had revealed their ultimate weapon. Malachor now knew what it was facing. It would adapt. "Then we don't give it the chance to return," Lance said, his voice a low growl of determination. "We follow it. We end this now. A direct assault on its core," Steven countered, his analytical mind already running through the probabilities. "We are at our limit. Our Pokémon are exhausted. We don't even know what its core is. To rush in now would be suicide. It is the only way," Ash Lucario said, his voice cutting through the debate. He turned to face them, his crimson eyes holding the weight of a terrible, final certainty. "But you are right, Steven. You cannot go. We cannot go." He looked at his own hands. "Only I can." The protest was immediate and universal. "Absolutely not," Cynthia said, her voice sharp, her hand gripping his shoulder as if to physically hold him there. "We fight together. That was the promise." "And we will," he replied, his gaze softening as it met hers. "Your fight is here. It will not leave its core undefended. The moment I approach, it will throw every remaining shadow, every echo of its power, at this position to stop me. Your battle will be to hold this ground. To buy me the time I need." He looked at the champions, at the humbled, resolute Kale and the united Aura Guardians. "You are the shield. You are the wall that will hold back the night. But the sword that strikes the heart, that must be me." He explained the knowledge gleaned from Aaron's crystal. Malachor was not just a being of immense power, it was a conceptual entity. Its core was a place of pure, ideological poison, a vortex of perfect, silent order that would unravel the minds of any who approached it. Any bond between a trainer and Pokémon would be a liability, a weakness for Malachor to exploit. Any human mind would be crushed by the sheer, empty perfection of the silence. But he was neither. He was the twin soul. He was not a bond between two beings that could be severed. He was a single, unified consciousness. He was the one anomaly, the one paradox, that the silent god's logic could not solve. He was not just their weapon. He was the key. There were no more arguments. They all saw the grim, unassailable truth in his words. This was the only way. The farewell was not one of tears or speeches. It was one of silent, profound trust. Lance gripped Ash Lucario's shoulder, a warrior's salute. Kale and the Guardians bowed as one, acknowledging their true leader. Cynthia stepped forward. For a long moment, she simply looked at him, her gray eyes conveying everything that could not be said. Then, she reached up and tucked a stray lock of her blonde hair behind her ear, a simple, human gesture that was more intimate than any embrace. "Come back," she said, her voice a soft command. "Always," he projected, and with that, he turned and leapt from the edge of the rock, falling into the swirling, chaotic void below. The moment he was gone, the world answered. The relative calm of the distortion world shattered. From the depths, a legion of Malachor's remaining power surged upwards, not a coordinated army, but a mindless, instinctual wave of despair given form, all of it directed at the single rock where the protectors of reality stood. "It begins," Lance roared, his voice a battle cry. "Champions, guardians, for our world, hold the line." The last stand of the Alliance was a legend waiting to be written. It was Cynthia, the strategist, who took command, her voice ringing with an authority born of desperation and genius. "Steven, your Metagross, We need a psychic barrier on the western flank. Diantha, your Gardevoir, intercept their alpha-level constructs before they reach our lines. Kale, the Aegis formation again. They will not break us. It was a battle against a faceless, endless tide, a fight to buy minutes that felt like centuries. Ash Lucar's journey to the core was a descent through the layers of his own soul. There were no monsters to fight, no physical obstacles. The battle was within. As he fell through the silent void, Malicor's voice whispered in the core of his being, a seductive, reasonable poison. Why do you struggle? It hummed, the voice a placid, calming sea. Look at the ones you fight for. They are so fragile. They feel so much pain. A lost battle, a sick Pokemon, a friend who leaves. It is an endless cycle of suffering. An image flooded his mind. Ash, a young boy, crying in the rain as he tried to shield a weak Charmander from a flock of attacking Spearow, the pain and the desperation raw and real. I can end that, Malicor whispered. In my world, the Charmander would never be abandoned. There would be no cruel trainers. There would be no weakness, no pain. Only purpose, only peace. Is that not a mercy? Ash Lucar pushed the vision away, focusing on the memory that came after. The warmth of the fire as he nursed Charmander back to health. The flicker of trust in its eyes, the fierce loyalty that was born from that shared struggle. A world without sorrow is a world without joy, he projected back into the void. A life without struggle is a life without meaning. He fell deeper. The temptations became more personal. Look at Cynthia, the voice purred. You feel for her. You would die for her. And she for you. But you are not the same. You are immortal, a being of aura. She is human. She will grow old. She will wither. She will die. And you will be left alone with that pain for eternity. I can fix that. I can make you both immortal. I can place you together in a perfect, timeless moment, forever. He saw a vision of himself and Cynthia, standing on a sun-drenched balcony, never aging, the world around them a perfect, static painting. No threats, no goodbyes. Just an endless, peaceful stillness. It was beautiful, and it was a cage. He countered the vision with a different one. The memory of her hand on his shoulder in the darkness of the TV tower, her trust and anchor in the psychic storm. The memory of her tear-streaked face as she knelt by her wounded Garchomp, her love a fierce, burning light. Her messy, chaotic, beautiful humanity was not a flaw. It was the entire point. You offer a picture, he shot back, his will a blade of crimson light. We choose the story, with all its pain, and all its glory. He broke through the final layer of illusion. He had arrived. The core of Malicor was not a throne room or a monster. It was a place of absolute, perfect non-existence. A sphere of flawless, polished black nothingness, floating in the heart of a silent void. It absorbed all light, all sound, all energy. It was a perfect sphere of order, a singularity of silence. This was Malicor's truest form. Not a being, but an idea. The idea that life was a cosmic error, and that the ultimate state of the universe was a return to the perfect, simple quiet that had preceded it. You have come so far to see the truth. The voice emanated from the sphere, no longer a whisper, but a statement of absolute, universal fact. You are the final, discordant note in a symphony that is yearning for its final, silent chord. Why do you resist perfection? Because perfection is a lie, Ash Lucar said, his voice echoing in the nothingness. He landed on an unseen floor before the sphere. You call life chaos. You call love a messy noise. You are wrong. They are the song. You are just the silence that comes after it ends. And the song is not over yet. A pretty metaphor, Malicor stated, without malice or anger. But it will not save you. This is my realm, my concept. Here, silence is absolute. Here, you will be unmade. The black sphere pulsed. The nothingness began to press in. It wasn't an attack. It was a metaphysical truth asserting itself. Ash Lucar's form began to flicker, the crimson light of his aura being consumed, his very existence being erased by the absolute silence. He knew he could not fight it on its own terms. He could not out-silence silence. He could not punch an idea. So he did the only thing he could. He did not resist. He embraced it. You are right, he said, as his body began to grow translucent. You cannot fight silence with noise. You can only fill it. He closed his eyes. He let go of his form, of his power, of his anger. He let go of everything but the core of what he was. Not a warrior, not a god, but the union of a boy who loved his Pokémon, and a Pokémon who loved his boy. He reached into the very heart of the twin soul and unleashed it. He became a star, a supernova of pure, incandescent crimson light erupted in the heart of the void. It was not an attack. It was a declaration. It was the color of a heartbeat. The color of a burning passion. The color of a bond that defied death itself. He was no longer Ash Lucario. He was a being of pure, conceptual aura. He was the song. He poured himself into the black sphere. The pain was the birth of a universe and the death of a star, all at once. He felt the absolute, crushing loneliness of Malicor's eons-long existence. He felt the cold, clean logic of its purpose. And he forced it to feel his. He gave the silence the memory of a mother's hug in Pallet Town. He gave it the taste of a poffin shared between a trainer and her partner. He gave it the thrill of a battle won, the sting of a battle lost. He gave it the quiet loyalty of Pikachu, the steadfast friendship of Brock and Misty, the fierce pride of Cynthia, the grudging respect of Kale. He flooded the perfect, clean, empty void with the messy, chaotic, painful, beautiful reality of life. The black sphere screamed. It was a sound that had never been made before, a sound of pure, ideological agony. The perfect silence was being broken, not from without, but from within. It was being taught to feel. The silent, empty God was being forcefully given a soul. The sphere cracked, not with purple energy, but with brilliant, crimson light. The light poured out, not destroying the darkness, but transmuting it. The black of the void began to lighten, softening to a deep, neutral gray. The oppressive silence was replaced by a gentle, quiet hum, like the sound of a sleeping world. With a final, shuddering pulse, the last of the blackness vanished. Malicor was not destroyed. It was resolved, cleansed of its hungry, absolute purpose. It had returned to what it was before, a primal, neutral force of nature. The idea of silence, no longer a predator, but simply a possibility. A choice. The war was over. In the chaos of the last stand, the shadow horde suddenly dissolved into harmless motes of dust. The champions and guardians stood, panting, in the now calm expanse of the distortion world. They had held the line. They had won. But their victory was silent. They all looked down into the void, waiting. Cynthia's heart was a cold stone in her chest. She could no longer feel his presence. The brilliant, defiant star of his aura had gone out. He had won. And the price had been himself. She fell to her knees, the strength leaving her legs. A single tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. And then, she heard it. A faint, familiar sound. Pika Pi. From the void, a tiny, flickering yellow light ascended. It was Pikachu, who had stowed away, unnoticed, clinging to Ash Lucario's essence. He was crying, his small body trembling as he floated over a spot in the air where a cloud of faint, crimson motes was slowly, gently, dissipating into nothing. His friend was gone. His desperate, grief-stricken cry was a spark. It was a bond. It was a promise that had not yet been fulfilled. The dissipating motes of crimson aura paused. Cynthia got to her feet. He's still there, she whispered, her own bond, her own desperate hope, reaching out into the void. He's there. Lance, Steven, Kale, all of them, they focused their will, their gratitude, their hope, on that fading cloud of light. They sent their own strength, not as an attack, but as an offering. An anchor. Come back. The motes of light trembled. A memory sparked within the fading consciousness, the feel of Cynthia's hand on his shoulder. It was a promise, always. The dissipating cloud stopped, and then, slowly, agonizingly, it began to reverse. The motes of light coalesced, drawn together by a web of 100 unbreakable bonds. The crimson light reignited, not as a supernova, but as a warm, steady hearth fire. Form returned to the formless. Ash Lucario materialized on the rock before them, kneeling on one knee, his head bowed, his body translucent and flickering. He had been pulled back from the very edge of oblivion. Pikachu immediately zipped to his shoulder, nuzzling him with frantic, relieved cries. He looked up, his crimson eyes finding Cynthia's. He gave her a weak, tired, but very real smile. Epilogue. 6 months later. The sun was warm on the slopes of Mount Coronet. The sky was a brilliant, cloudless blue. The scars of the Argent Society's ritual were gone, healed over by the tireless work of humans, Pokémon, and the revitalized life force of the world. At a newly built training ground, a place that blended the natural rock with the elegant architecture of the League, a new generation of Guardians was being taught. They were a diverse group, young trainers from all regions, their Pokémon partners at their sides. They were learning not the rigid katas of the old ways, but a new philosophy. Aura is not a weapon, a familiar, harmonious voice explained. It is a conversation. You must learn to listen before you can speak. Ash Lucario walked among them, no longer a terrifying enigma, but a respected, if still awe-inspiring, leader. His form was solid, his power a calm, steady presence. He guided a young girl and her Eevee, showing them how to feel the life in the stone beneath their feet. Watching from a balcony overlooking the training grounds were two figures. One was Cynthia, her champion's coat replaced by a simple, practical researcher's jacket. The other was Kale. The old traditionalist's face was no longer stern, but serene. He had found a new purpose not as a leader, but as a wise and steady advisor, his deep knowledge of their history now a foundation for their new future, rather than a cage. He is a natural teacher, Kale observed, his voice holding a quiet reverence. He is teaching them not just to be guardians, but to be partners. In a way, he is teaching them the very first lesson, the one we had all forgotten. He had good teachers, Cynthia replied, a soft smile on her lips as she watched him. Her work was far from over. The Argent Society had been dismantled, but their ideology lingered. The world was healing, but it was a slow, complex process. But for the first time in a long time, the future felt bright. Later that evening, as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the mountain, she found him standing alone at the edge of the training grounds, looking out at the sprawling world below. Pikachu was dozing on his shoulder. The world feels quiet, she said, coming to stand beside him. It is, he replied, his voice a quiet, spoken word now, the harmony still there but softer, more natural. He had learned to control it. The silence is still there. But it's not hungry anymore. It's just peaceful. He was still both Ash and Lucario, a perfect, stable fusion. He was a new kind of being in a new kind of world. A guardian in the truest sense. What now? Cynthia asked, the question open-ended, full of possibilities. He turned to her, his crimson eyes warm in the twilight. The twin souls within him looked at the woman who had become their anchor, their partner, their closest friend. The future was vast and unknown, full of new challenges and new adventures. But they would face it. Now, he said, a familiar, confident grin spreading across his face, a grin that was all Ash Ketchum. The real journey begins, and they stood together, equals, partners, legacies, watching the sun set on a world they had saved, ready for whatever came next. Together. Chapter 10 End.